Okay, and you're all set. I'm gonna hang for a minute to just make sure everything goes okay.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, welcome to Manhattan Community Board 2 Landmarks Committee meeting. I'm Susan Gammey. I'm the vice chair of the committee. I'll be presiding tonight because Chenault Spence is not with us this evening. I think most of you know what our typical protocol here is. Each applicant will present. Presentation will be followed by questions from the committee members who are both here and online. And that will be followed by comments from the public. And then we'll move to the next application. After we've heard all the applications, the community board members and Albert Bennett, who's our public member who's here tonight, we'll meet in a business session where we will discuss our resolutions. The public is more than welcome to stay for that, but is not able to speak during that part of the meeting. I'm going to ask that all applicants please assume that we are all very familiar with the basic history of our district and all its various specific and unique historic districts within CB2. So we don't need a sort of from scratch education. Welcome everybody. Our first application that we'll hear tonight is 65-83 West Houston Street. Oh, for one moment, let's everybody on the committee introduce themselves. And we've got two members online. So let's have the in-room people introduce themselves, please, followed by the Zoom members of the committee. So
Anita Brandt, committee member.
Brian Pape, committee member.
Valerie De La Rosa, committee member.
Albert Bennett, public member.
Eugene Yu, committee member.
perfect, thank you. So 6583 West Houston is the first application we'll hear. And the application is to paint over graffiti on the building masonry facade in LPC approved colors to match the existing polychrome CMU masonry facade. Are you the presenter?
No, I'm the owner. Just like this.
If Mark could make me co-host, then I can help with the elevation.
That's great. Thanks.
See Helen Thomas.
In a moment. Yes.
When you do speak, come over here and
Close to a
speak
microphone.
in the mic.
Come and sit at the table so we can hear you, so that everybody can hear you. Will the applicants online please raise hands so that we can see who needs to?
I don't see her.
Thank you.
There she is.
All right.
There I
So
am. I had to
before
be
we
added
get
as panelist.
Before we get started with the actual presentation, we have the property owner here who wishes to speak for a moment. So
A
please.
few seconds if I can, Helen. I represent, my name is Bob Besnard. I represent the owner of the property, which is West Houston Street, Soho Court, and a managing agent who built the building, Manhattan Skyline Management Company. 40 years ago, we built it in one of the first landmark buildings built completely from scratch in the new landmark law 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And that we had a problem right from the very first day, and that was graffiti. And we spent a lot of time working on it, trying to get it handled. And we really couldn't find a solution. So we went to the Landmarks Commission about a year ago to have a conversation about it, because to paint on it right now is illegal. Even though the graffiti artists paint on it, we can't paint on it. And some of our tenants have painted on them to cover up the graffiti. And so that gave us a lot of confusion and complications. And we went for many years trying to figure out what to do. We hired Javlosky Building Conservators and met Helen Thomas Haney, who is a terrific lady. And she put our whole arguments together in a report and a very short presentation, because I could spend 2 hours talking about it. I'd rather her do it in 10 minutes, which and gives us a solution, and hopefully we can get it approved. That's
Great, thank you. Thank you. Helen, please go ahead and share your presentation with us.
Can you see it?
Yep.
All right, excellent.
Yep.
So again, for the record, my name is Helen Thomas Haney. I am a principal at Jablonski Building Conservation. We were hired by Bob and his company to help them figure out this problem. So as you said, I'm not going to give you the whole big history of your district because you know it very well, but just a little background about our little building here. It's constructed of 8-inch load-bearing CMU blocks. It is located on the northern edge of the Soho cast iron district. It's lot 15 on block 515. And it's on the corner of West Houston Street to the north and Wooster Street to the east. It's 9 bays long across West Houston Street and 1 bay wide along Wooster Street. It was completed in 1984 and designed by the architecture firm Beyer Blinder Bell. So as I said, it's constructed of 8-inch load-bearing CMU blocks as highlighted in the section drawing on the left. The blocks are all 8 inches high, but with different depths and lengths. The table in the middle shows the unique shapes that were used to construct the facade. False joints were scored into the longer blocks to simulate the appearance of an 8 by 8 inch square block. Both the true and simulated joints were then filled with type S mortar. The diagram on the right shows the locations and the placements of all of these special blocks. So as you can see, it really is a jigsaw puzzle. So the most notable feature of this building is its polychromed appearance. Original drawings called out for the colors of the glazed CMU block. The main body of the building is composed of deep hemlock green with deep astral blue window surrounds at the second floor. The base and block around the openings on the ground floor are colored special black. The multicolored cornice contains deep Sierra red in the upper dental, special black in the frieze, and deep astral blue in the lower dental. Starting almost immediately after construction, as Bob explained, the building has been tagged with graffiti. The building's location along West Houston Street with its flat, relatively blank surface has made it an ideal canvas. In the first years, the landlord's maintenance staff regularly removed the graffiti themselves. However, in the 90s, the owner hired a graffiti removal company to professionally remove it. All of the invoices, some only a year apart, describe the work as removing the graffiti from the green and black block and sealing it with a graffiti coating. The invoices also provided for free cleaning within 1 year of service, though it's unclear how often that was done. After 30 or so years of constant graffiti removal, the surface of the blocks have become damaged. The image on the screen is a Google image from 2014. Level with the roll-down gate enclosures, you can see the darkened blocks from the anti-graffiti coating. Below that, the effects of the continual graffiti cleaning is evident. The blocks appear hazed, streaked, and uneven. Up close, the damage is more apparent. Originally, the blocks had a smooth surface, which are still intact on the second floor and at the cornice level. However, surface erosion and gouges are visible through the paint in the blocks at the ground level. Some of the gouges appear to be lettering, as shown in the first image on the left. It's possible that this damage is the result of the graffiti removal process or could be acts of vandalism themselves. The image on the right shows 3 pock marks in the surface of a green block. As you can see, the color is only present in the outer few millimeters of the surface. Some of the surface damage under the paint may be deep enough to have exposed the non-pigmented body of the block. For the past 7 years, some tenants have tried to address and deter graffiti themselves. The ground floor has been painted green and black to match the blocks. So you can see in this Google image from 2017, the painting is pretty close to what the original colors are. However, over time, the green overpainting to hide subsequent tagging is no longer a close match to the original color. Also, the tenant on the corner of Wooster Street has erected freestanding planters with a trellis to restrict access to the facade, as shown in the image on the left. However, graffiti artists still managed to work around the plants. Approximately a year ago, when a new tenant was applying for LPC approval for the new storefront design, the building owners discussed with the LPC staff how best to handle their graffiti problem. The LPC staff suggested that methods for removal of the paint and the graffiti should be investigated. The owners reached out to contractors and building and cleaning product manufacturers for solutions. And finally, they hired us, Jablonski Building Conservation, to test removal options. So as you can see in this picture, we tested 8 different products on the green and black areas of the ground floor. Full removal of the paint and graffiti residues was achieved using 2 overnight applications of Cathedral Stone's light duty paint stripper. And those 2 areas are circled in the white on the black area and in black on the green area. However, to further illustrate the frequency at which this facade is tagged, our paint stripping test area was tagged between the first and second applications of the product, as you can see on that image on the right. So after considering several options for combating the graffiti, we are requesting a waiver to paint the ground floor masonry in matte acrylic paint to match the original blocks. Continued graffiti removal every time the facade is tagged will further erode the blocks, resulting in their ultimate destruction. And replacement of these blocks will require a custom product due to the variety of sizes and the integrally colored surface. JBC matched the green block to Pittsburgh Paint's Paradise Found and the dark gray block to Pittsburgh Paint's Knight's Armor. If approved, the colors will be mocked up and adjusted as necessary to achieve the closest match. We propose that the current layers of paint and graffiti are removed using the Cathedral Stone paint stripper, and then the facade painted using the matte latex paints in the approved colors that match the original block. And as the building gets tagged, tenants or the building management company can paint over the graffiti using the approved paints. The overpainting in the graffiti can then be periodically and professionally removed, perhaps every few years, and repainted. Therefore, to close, we believe this method has a number of benefits. Periodic repainting is easily maintainable by the tenants and does not require specialized experience to execute. Acrylic latex paint also can be matched to the color and sheen of the blocks and is easily removable. Mineral paints can also achieve the same color and surface finish as the block. However, they are permanent and must be mechanically removed using microabrasive techniques that can erode the block, which ironically is what we're trying to avoid. Lastly, painting over the graffiti as it occurs reduces the number of times the facade needs to be stripped and thereby limits the potential for further erosion of the blocks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have 1.5 questions.
Yeah.
One is, I just want to make sure I correctly understand how the surface, how you're proposing to prepare the surface before the first painting of the Pittsburgh acrylic paint. Will you be taking it down to how far down are you taking what's currently there?
Taking it all the way down to the original block surface.
Okay, great.
So taking everything off. So in the picture that I put back up on the screen, that's what our test showed, that we need 2 applications to get all the way down.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. The other thing is there any other kind of intermediate preparation, a base coat of sorts that would make the every 3 year or however long it is, the subsequent acrylic paint removal
Easier.
easier? Yeah.
Perhaps, I did not look into that, but if we do that, I would say that the paint gets removed, and then it gets painted, and then some sort of that intermediate layer gets put on. That would be my recommendation, but I don't know off the top of my head what that would be.
You don't feel that it would be-
what
you don't feel that it would be necessary because you don't feel that every few years, the stripping of the acrylic paint every few years would not contribute to a worsened condition ultimately of the existing brick?
Well, I mean, what we see here is basically, is the result of yearly removal efforts.
Yeah.
So, even if we can reduce it by 5 years,
Yeah.
I think that would be quite beneficial.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody on the committee in the room with a question?
Yeah, I had a little trouble hearing. I don't know,
Oh, I'm
maybe
sorry.
the volume or something, but I sort of wanted to make sure I understand the scope of work. And from what I understand, the graffiti is a big problem. I understand that. So in lieu of trying to remove the graffiti, which is damaging the surface of the block, it's going to be painted over? Don't you have to remove the graffiti? It'll bleed through, or did I miss
No,
something?
the removing of the graffiti is what does it. It's the removing that destroys the
I
surface.
understand that.
So every time we try to remove it, that's why we stopped doing it, because it was clear that we were getting this very dull, which was a very shiny surface. It was just, and we couldn't recreate it. And so that if we do as the conservators recommend, a water-based paint, it's so much easier to take off. So we put that paint on, then in a way, that would be easier to, so that the other paint doesn't go to the surface.
So the
That's
graffiti is on that paint.
exactly.
Correct.
Okay.
So and then it's a whole lot of,
What does that have to do with the 3 years?
well.
Okay, so what's going to happen ultimately, if history of this poor facade has taught us anything, we'll get it all clean, we'll get it all nice and painted, and then it'll get graffitied, right?
Yeah.
And so instead of like cleaning the graffiti off because it's going to, damage, we will paint over the graffiti. And so we'll have a maintenance cycle where these over paintings then get taken off again. But that maintenance cycle, excuse me?
You've done experiments of painting over the graffiti with the paint?
Right now it is. There's graffiti.
Yeah, we did hear, I understand it's hard to hear. I have hearing aids, so I didn't hear much as well. So we sitting in the same place. But what happens is that the paint that we put on is water-based. So that gives us the first coat, and then somebody paints on top of it. We paint on top of it, and what?
But it doesn't bleed through. That's
No,
my
it doesn't.
question.
No,
I want to
no.
know if you did an experiment.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, have we experimented with the paint we want to use,
Yeah, if you have a
graffitiing it,
black
and then
lettering on that green, it's not that easy to cover it. That's all. I'm just concerned that it may not be,
Oh, we've
I
had a
see.
lot of black marks on this, and
and it works.
it
you're
does.
saying.
It's just,
All right.
if we don't do it so many times, it'll work, as she says, longer. And that's really what we were after. The interesting thing for us, maybe the most important thing for us, is that the merchants thinks this is a way to handle it. They come to work in the morning, they all have colored paints. And if there's something on it, they open it up and they take the paint and it's done, rather than waiting for us or to hire a remover.
Well, and graffiti is very bad for the street, the neighborhood.
And our merchants want to do something, and that's how we found, we didn't start painting it originally, they did. And it was that kind of activity because they were enthusiastic, and to a certain degree, it looks as good as it looks there because they painted it, we didn't paint it. We stopped when we realized that it was not the way to do it. But the merchant doesn't want, a tag rather than having, it's a very nice building and the design is unique.
Was there a violation from LPC for the merchants?
We never got a violation. We got a warning
A
3 times.
warning.
And the first time we got a warning was, and we didn't actually know they were painting it. See, there is 2 issues here. One is the stone, which is the big issue. The other is the red awnings, you see. So the red awnings are metal, and they were approved in 2005 for us to try to, with Landmark's approval, to try to, because we didn't have gates on it. So if you look at one of the first slides, you'd see the stores had different kinds of gates. She'll go to the second slide. One more. There, on the left. See how the gates are different? So we did this, and then with that in mind, it was Landmarks that suggested this. Why don't we paint the surface of the metal? And they could paint the red. So we had given them the paint, the red paint that the Landmarks approved to paint over that. But it just was an easy jump to start painting the other colors
I
themselves.
understand it. It's fine. I mean, I have no problem with it. I think that.
Do either of you, oh, sorry. Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, so are we limited to the first floor only on this application?
Yes,
But-
that seems to be the limit
Nobody
of the
expected
graffiti.
perfect upstairs. That's been a blessing. I don't want to say it too much because they are very athletic. But so far, and it's 40 years, we've really had it where you can touch it or with a short ladder.
Yeah, I mean, luckily there's really no place to climb on this building. It's pretty flat, so I think they've.
Well, you'll deal with it when and if it happens, but
Yeah,
right now, that's the obvious spot. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Eugene or Albert, do you have any questions for the applicant? No?
Yes, I guess so. I'm not certain what our function is here. Are we going to, if we decide to recommend approval, does that mean that you will not have to return every time you want to make some change in your plans?
I'm not sure I understand that.
I just want to know if you're going to have to come back to us.
No, if we,
That's the
as I understand it now, I'm interpreting this as, because that's how we built this
Let me go
building.
back to this.
Went through this process 40 years ago and got a building approved and the colors approved. And so long as we do what the legislation says, and the conservators, Helen, has picked exact colors, we're going to put the colors on. Landmarks comes out
Sorry,
and
I
looks at
lost
it.
the share.
We do it, no problem. If you don't, we get a violation.
It sounds similar to our master plans for signs.
In a way, right, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Certain size, certain color, certain border, all the details.
Like a master maintenance.
Then
Exactly.
they can make the changes over time within those restrictions.
Exactly, and if right,
So-
the scope of the work were to change, then that would,
So we're saying, within the scope of these colors, this type of paint. this
the
type
first
of-
floor,
And so
Right.
forth. They can go in and do it over and over and over again.
That's what we need.
okay, thank you. Let's see if anybody from the public has anything to say or ask. Would any of our attendees
Hands raised?
like to raise a hand and ask a question? I don't see anybody.
Don't see any hands raised from the Zoom attendees.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Both very much. And now I think we can move on to 338 Bowery. I see an attendee, James Cott. Is there anybody in the room for that? No, okay. 338 Bowery, the application is to replace the existing wood doors and frame with steel frame and metal doors in kind and design to match existing. Repaint window frames from white to black. Request the use of existing bracket for signage, plaque size on facade, and blade sign on second floor. So James, please feel free to share your screen and start your presentation.
Okay, does everyone see my screen?
Yep, we're good.
Hi, everyone. So my name is James Cott, and I represent the ownership and developer Dovetail for this property at 338 Bowery. 338 Bowery is located on Bowery between Great Jones Street and Bond Street. And as you can see here, this is the building historically. It's directly across the street from the Bowery Hotel. These are both tax photos from different times. This was the earliest tax photo that we can find. The building was built in 1917. And you can see here by evidence of the Model T cars that it's around the same area here as well. This building was formerly known as the White House Hotel. It was a lodging house back in the day. And when we acquired it a couple years ago, it was still a lodging house, but it was mostly vacant at the time. And we are currently in the process of converting it into a transient use hotel, but it will still be in the lodging house format, meaning open floor plan with cubicles, so to speak. This is what it looks like today on the street. This is the building today. It's been, as you can see, it's been painted over many times over the course of the years. Some of the windows are now, the window frames are painted green. The fire escape is red. And the storefront has evolved over the time as well. Here's a closer look at the building as it exists today. This is the north side of the building, and this is the south side of the building. And I will be referring to the north storefront and the south storefront throughout this presentation. The north storefront would be utilized for retail use, which will be leased out. And the south storefront will be the hotel entrance for the building with guest rooms on the second floor, third floor, and fourth floor. On the north storefront, as you can see, the original historic storefront was still in place at the time. It was a steel storefront with divided light glass, but with wooden doors instead. Here in more detail, as you can see on the south side where the hotel storefront would be, over time it's been replaced with a more modern storefront. We already have approval from landmarks at staff level to replace the storefront to match historical. So the south storefront will be fully demolished and replaced with the same matching style of the existing north storefront with the divided lights and the color glass as well. The north storefront would also be fully replaced with the steel storefront that was also approved by landmarks already and is currently under construction. This is just a floor plan that you can see on the first floor level. Again, this is the north side where there will be a retail tenant for use. And the south side of the building, you can see this is a small hotel lobby with the storefront on this side of the building. So this is the existing storefront and proposed storefront, and I'll go through this in detail throughout the presentation, but just to give you an overall feel for the front facade elevation, this is what it will look like in the future. And I'll go through each one of the requested scopes of work in this presentation in the following pages. So this is just in a large photo, a large drawing of the South Hotel storefront. As you can see, it shows the new divided light steel storefront, which will replace the existing modern storefront that was installed over time. This is the north storefront to the retail area, which will also be brand new, as mentioned previously. And so the changes that will require a public hearing are the following. So historically, as you can see, the window frames on floors 2, 3, and 4 had a white paint color on them. Today, they're multicolored with green and red. And what we would like to do is to paint the window frames, the existing window frames, black, so that it is more consistent in nature with the storefront on the ground floor, which has always been black. So it gives the building more uniformity. So that is the first required scope of work that we are asking for approval for. The second scope of work that we are requesting is for the entry storefront doors to be changed historically from wood doors to steel doors to match the rest of the steel storefront. So the window system was all historically fabricated in steel. We are fabricating them in steel today and with new. However, we are requesting that the doors also be made in steel as well. We have not successfully found any wood door manufacturer who would actually warranty making these door systems in wood because they said it will be structurally unsound. As you might be able to tell a little bit from this photo that the heavy wood doors are sagging a bit, and they share the same concern if we were to place them in wood. Hence, we are requesting that these also be made in steel, so it would match the materiality with the rest of the storefront system as well. And it will also be painted black to match the rest of the system. And the same thing goes for the south side as well, and also for these fire stair doors as well. The third request is to add exterior lighting to the storefront. Historically, they had 2 lights flanking the north storefront doors at these 2 locations. We would like to add them in 5 locations. Perhaps I can zoom in so you can see better here. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with this brass wall sconce. It's the name of the sconce is a Tolson cage wall sconce. The finish is aged brass. The shade will be an opal glass. The overall fixture width will be 4 7/8 inches. The overall length will be 9 3/4 inches, and the overall depth will be 6 3/8 inches. The next requested change that we would like to make is to have a blade sign signifying the hotel name. The hotel's name will be called Now Hotel. This is the logo. As you can see, historically, there was also a blade sign for the White House Hotel in this photo here. It was a larger, it was a sign that protruded more out into beyond the property line onto the street. However, what we are proposing is something that protrudes much less beyond the property line within 18 inches, which is actually the permitted signage code for this district, 18 inches beyond the property line, but it will also be about 75 inches tall. The 2 colors would be neon green and forest green, which resembles the brand colors for the hotel. And just to give you guys an idea of scale, it is shown here on this facade elevation here in red. So it will be mounted in the same historic location on the 2nd floor level, and the height is smaller than an existing window on the 2nd floor. Okay. And it'll also be a lit box. Again, the overall dimensions would be 18 inches protrusion from the facade of the building and 75 inches tall. And the next requested change is a plaque sign, which will be placed on the front of the building and much more legible copy, now, NoHo, 33 Bowery. The overall size dimension would be 9 inches by 13.5 inches. And the materiality would be cast bronze. Here is a photo image of the exact style and colors that we would be making the plaque sign for. And again, in terms of location on the building, I'll bring you back to the overall elevation here. It'll be located on the ground floor level facade at this location here. And again, historically, there was also a sign at the same location as well for the White House Hotel at the time, as you can see in this historic photo here. Those are the major scope of changes that we are requesting. There's a couple of other small changes as well. There will be, there's an existing set of stairs here on the north side that goes into the cellar level. You can see them on plan here, stair G. The issue is that the existing set of stairs doesn't meet code requirement in terms of the slope for the rise and run of the steps. And so in order to, we have currently built out a code compliant staircase, but in order to meet code, we have to create more of a head clearance here within the facade. So we would have to remove 6 courses of brick to enlarge the opening for code required reasons. So actually on the staff level, we had already received approval to remove 3 courses of brick. However, upon demolition and further field measurements, we realized that another three courses of brick needed to be removed to actually meet the required head clearance for the stairs. And the last minor change is for the fire escape doors. So we are just requesting to have these 3 doors either repaired in kind or replaced entirely in kind if repair is not fully sufficient. And again, just to remind you what the existing look like, they are solid doors that were painted red here. And that is the entirety of the scope of work that we are requesting for 338 Bowery.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to start with a couple of questions. One is regarding the blade sign, the 75-inch long blade sign. Is that 75 inches within the allowable LPC guidance for the size of a blade sign?
So the blade sign as designed is within the permitted signage requirements in this district, which is outlined here. So the maximum area of all signs is up to 219 square feet each. So we are well within 219 square feet, considering this is only about a little over 6 feet and 18 inches. And the other requirement, as I mentioned previously, is the maximum projection over the property line is 18 inches for a double sign, and the maximum height of the sign is 40 feet. And the signs are permitted to be illuminated as well. So those are the parameters that we are working within.
And how much distance is there from the bottom edge of that sign to the sidewalk?
So.
Oh, I see. There's a lot. Okay.
So this is 12'8" here. So it's about, I would say about 15 feet to the bottom of the sign. There's actually, you know, it'll be above the existing fire escape, which is below the sign as well.
All right. So we're not really used to seeing internally illuminated blade signs so much in this district. I mean, we sometimes have blade signs that have some sort of external illumination, but the sort of light box kind of vocabulary of this sign isn't one that we necessarily typically see in the district. And I'm wondering what your inspiration for that is.
Well, understood. Well, the original inspiration was seeing the original blade sign, which we can probably safely say was not a lit sign, but was a larger sign that protruded farther out from the building. Actually, I take that back. It's very hard to tell from a historic photo whether any part of it was lit at all, whether it was the neon sign, etc. So I really can't say what it was historically. We can see the overall size of the sign, and there is a chance that it was even lit in the past. But this was the original trigger for us to also want to establish a sign to signal that there is a hotel located at this site.
Right, but you're not really able to point to another sign that has that sort of internal illumination.
No, I wouldn't say that there is a hotel on Bowery that has a similar illumination, but in a different district, Hotel Chelsea is another example with a very large blade sign that is lit at night. I understand that's a different district, but that's just to give you an example of another large blade sign that is lit.
Right, no, I was just asking within our district here, yeah. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have, Valerie, please?
Regarding proposal number 3, can you point to other examples in the NoHo Historic District where that material is used? It just really the finish.
Oh, yeah.
Are you referring to the aged brass finish? I don't believe there is any existing lighting fixture on Bowery that I can recall off the top of my head as an aged brass finish. I do know that adjacent properties do have a black lighting sconces on the facade, as does the Bowery Hotel. But the aged brass is very in keeping with historical finishes in New York City, generally speaking, and that's something that we would like to be able to achieve for the design of this building.
And so you're saying the aged brass is in keeping with historic of New York City in general, but not within the NoHo Historic District, is that correct?
I cannot speak to whether it's in keeping with any other building in the NoHo district, to be honest. We would have to do further research on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Anita.
Well, I think aged brass is a misnomer.
Yeah.
This is shiny brass.
Yeah.
Aged brass is almost black usually with a little brass, and that might be a little more in keeping with the overall facade. Just a toned down version. It looks a little.
It looks like it's gonna stand out as a
shiny
new thing on a
yeah,
an aged building.
Yeah.
In a not an aesthetically pleasing way.
I have a couple of questions, so I'll run through them and then we can see what you want to say. My first question is, I'm looking at this very nice old photograph, not the oldest one, but the next to oldest one. If you could go to that. There you go. Now, my question is, why would you not put back a door with some glass in it rather than that flat, solid metal door that really draws attention to itself on each and every floor?
Are you referring to the fire escape doors on floors
Exactly.
2, 3, and 4?
Correct.
So our intention was to keep the existing fire doors in place and just paint them because they're in good form and they function just in the same way that we are keeping the existing windows and window frames.
Oh, I thought you were replacing them. Well, when you do replace them, please replace them with something less flat and solid. The other question is and again, this is something, it's a pet peeve of mine. So indulge me for a minute. If you look at the facade, let me just go to your drawing here on LPC 12.01. And you have this really very interesting glass, multi-pane iron frame thing. I don't even understand the colors and so on, but I assume we're just putting back what was there. What my question is the divisions of the doors. Now, these are new steel doors with the glass, divided glass. That divided glass is not the same proportion and not as elegant as the original. I can't tell in the photographs, but it looks like this sort of, it got shorter. They're very square. They're square divided lights as opposed to rectangular. And it's not as, yes, as elegant as the infill. And it looks to me like you've actually raised that bottom piece up, which exasperates the squareness. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what it looks like.
So perhaps this is a better photo. So as you can see from this photo, these divided light dimensions are more square than the adjacent rectangular divided lights within the window section.
I realize that, but I'm also saying that I think you've raised up that bottom portion of the door in the drawing and made them more square. So I'm just trying to improve the overall appearance. If it were me, I would try to get back to the rectangular shape as opposed to that kind of square, door that you get any old place, I don't know. I think it would really
Just went by.
So let's see here. The intention is to match the historical door. So I just want to be able to make sure that I'm seeing what you're seeing. So where the glazing starts on this door, on this drawing, is at the same location that it has, that it is historically.
It doesn't look like that in the photograph, that's my point. But again, I'll believe you if you measured it, but it doesn't look like that in the photograph. It looks like it's been pushed up. And if you brought it down, and you are replacing it, so you could improve it if you were so inclined.
Right, so just based on this elevation, as you can see, the bottom of where the glazing starts for the door is approximately the middle of the bottom divided light glass here. So let's go back to the original photo and see where that is.
See? Is it? It's a little lower. I don't know.
Maybe a little lower. Yeah, we can certainly verify those dimensions.
I don't think you have to be a slave to it. You are replacing it. So I'm just saying this might be an opportunity where you could jazz it up a little nicer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we can double check.
They came along. Who knows? Who knows? Those, that's what you sell at Home Depot. And I'm sure they didn't go crazy when they renovated piecemeal over the years here. So whatever was available.
I would say on this side, on the right side, though, the bottom of where the glazing starts is approximately the center of the glazing of the window. But, we can certainly double check what is existing. Because I don't disagree with you.
I'm suggesting an improvement regardless of what's there. The other question, and then I'll be done, is the sign. We have a plaque. And I'm just a little confused by in the drawing, it's like this white box. Is the plaque placed on, yes, that's fine. But the sign is going on the elevation.
Correct.
It looks, isn't there brick there? Go to the elevation if you don't mind.
Sure.
Oh, there you go. You see that white box? What is that?
That's just to show the placement of where the sign would be.
Okay, but the sign is much smaller than that.
Correct. This is not the proportion of the sign.
And so what's on there? So it's actually brick, it's going on a brick.
It's brick, correct.
Base?
This entire facade section is brick.
So maybe you should just draw it properly, because I don't know what that is. It makes it look a lot bigger and more intrusive than it really is.
Understood. I think that's a good note. So we can certainly
Yeah.
show that.
And then I do have a last thing, is the iron railings, and I see you are raising up, you need more headroom, I understand that. And the railings are just staying as they are, you're just keeping that?
No, we are building new railings because they will need, by code, they're required to have railings for these stairs. So we are building them new. So they'll
I'm
be.
talking about handrail, but I'm talking about the enclosure railings, the actual fence, if you will. I don't know what you want to call it. The enclosure of the step.
Oh,
What-
right here, yes.
Oh, that's the gates to go down?
Those are the gates to go down, and those are required for safety so that no one falls into the steps if they don't happen to see them.
Okay, so you're replacing that one and also the other one? Isn't there another one as well?
No, this will be the only staircase down into the building.
Is there
The
any
other
other
one-
railing?
So this existing stair will be filled with concrete. So this will be going away.
I see. Okay, thank you for that. All right, thank you.
Brian,
All right, James, if you wouldn't mind going through each of the proposals with me. Once again, as I understand it, for the first proposal, LPC staff has okayed the replacement of the storefront windows,
Correct. That's already been approved.
or generally the whole storefront.
Correct. So the only change that we are requesting in regards to the storefront is to change the materiality of the doors from wood to steel so that it matches the rest of the storefront.
And just following up on Anita's point, do you have definitive documentation that says that those are the original doors or that they are the exact original replicas of original doors?
We don't have exact documentation, but just matching it with the historic photos and our understanding that it's never been replaced based on previous ownership. It's pretty safe to say that these were the original doors. Just by also our architect is verified the same as well, based on the overall construction of the doors and how they were put together.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing to see 110-year-old wood doors still existing with that kind of abuse that a commercial building would give it.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
I
it's
would
certainly
agree.
falling apart.
Anita, that redesigning the glazing to match the sill height of the windows would be a very big improvement. The second item is repainting the window frames.
on the
Correct.
second, third, and fourth.
So
Oh, that's your number one.
this is our number one, correct? To paint the window frames black to be consistent with the black storefront. So the building has a more uniform aesthetic.
All right, so I believe historically, they've always been white. And
Correct.
I would also say that historically, it's typical for the storefront to be different than the upper floors. And so I would have to say that there's something about keeping those upper floors as they are, has an argument going for it. But as long as we're looking at this, then I'll also reiterate, the fire escape doors are not at all looking like the original facade doors on the fire escape. And I think it's a missed opportunity not to replace those doors with something that looks like the originals. So you All right, so I guess that's the question, whether you've considered it or would reconsider it. And if you have, that's great. Take another look. So the next proposal on your list. Okay, we've done number 2 already. And 3 is the exterior lighting. This is, to me, this is blatantly a private residential suburban little gimmicky little thing that just seems to have no place on the Bowery. It's just too flimsy. It's too, it almost, it's plastic, but it's definitely diminutive. I mean, it's too small and it's not firm enough. I don't think it would withstand any kind of abuse. And I think on the Bowery, you're going to have abuse because it's all within reach, close to it. And so I could not, I don't think that's appropriate lighting. And I think you could find something better. And I think it was mentioned something in a darker color metal would be more appropriate as well. Okay. The next proposal item, please. Okay, new signage, okay.
Eight sign.
Yeah. Signs can be illuminated, so I guess that answers that part of the question. So would we go to the next item? And I'm fine with that as it's been explained. Brass plaque installed on brick. And next.
And the next ones are smaller items, which is the removed courses of brick to create the proper head clearance for the stairs. And just the fire escape doors, which is not really part of the scope. We're just keeping them existing and painting it black to match everything else.
Yeah, so the cellar gates and the guardrail seems appropriate. It's very plain looking, which I guess might be appropriate. Again,
yeah, these just to clarify, the gates and the guardrails are not part of this request. This was already approved at the staff level by Landmarks.
Oh, okay.
All right.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Well, that's the end of the list, and thank you very much for all that clarification.
I think Anita has one more question, and then we'll go to Albert.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean, I'm wondering, where is this through gas vent? I see a detail, but I don't know where it's located on the facade. You see the detail on the lower left? You're right. Yeah. Is that where that is? The gas
correct.
vent?
Correct.
And it's got a new gas vent cover. And what's that? I mean, is it the color of the brick? Is it black? Is it?
No, it would be black, but also the gas vent is not part of this application.
Okay,
But it would be, to answer your question, it would be painted black.
Hey, Albert, please go ahead.
Okay. The White House Hotel has a very interesting history, and it appears that I agree with Brian, you're destroying everything that indicates the history of what was recently described as the last of the typical Bowery flop houses, not a hotel, a flop house. And all of the white trim is going to be painted black. And I gathered that the only major structural change in the street facade is the removal of those windows, the basement windows. Is that correct?
Sorry, the removal of the replacement of the storefront. Are you referring to the storefront here?
Yeah, a structural change is the windows on the basement. Those will be removed and they will be replaced with brick. Is that correct?
No. So we have an existing staircase that goes into the cellar level from the street.
Yeah.
And so we had to rebuild those stairs to meet the code because it was too steep. So we had to change the slope of the stairs, which required more head clearance to go down the stairs. Thus, we had to remove extra courses of brick in the facade to create the code required head clearance for the stairs.
But that still remains an entrance to the basement.
To the basement, correct. That's the our second means of egress for the building.
Okay. Now, I believe that there were designs of the rear, the west facade. Is that true? Are there changes that are going to be made in the west facade? Of course, that's not visible from the street, but
the west facade, meaning the rear, is the west.
The rear
the west
facade
is the rear of the building.
Yes.
That's not part of this application, considering it is not facing the public.
Oh, in my research, I thought I saw drawings. There were examples of color for that facade.
Yes, we are repainting the windows in the rear facade. But again, that is not part of this application, considering that it is not facing the public.
Okay. I guess that's it. I'm just fascinated by the history.
It's a very unique building.
It is a unique building, and it will we're not supposed to talk about usage, but I wonder how very different it's going to be as the now hotel from the flop house that it was.
All right, thanks, Albert. Do we have any members? Yeah, before we go to the public, we've got Carter Booth here, who's a full board member.
So I just, a couple of things. That the beginning part, there's a much better tax photo for 530-37 instead of the tax photo that you have there. And it really highlights, I think, what Brian was talking about with the coloration on the windows above. And it has a little bit more clarity of sort of the streetscape as well on the photo. And I just refer to it because I agree with Brian with the distinction between the ground level facade and the upper floors. I feel like this proposal is moving a little bit more into the sleekness of a modern hotel and drifting away, or just even the facade, than what was there at the time. There's also the designation photo. There actually is a designation photo at the time that it was designated and shows the front door is blue, not black. And but I think a little more interesting is the other tax photo. You can clearly see the front door, and I think that it goes to what was being spoken about with how it levels up to the lintels on the windows. And I think that those are some of the unique characteristics here that Albert kind of addressed that really make this place, it's been fairly consistent. And even though the upper floor colors were different, still captures the differentiation on the time. As far as the blade sign, it really, and again, the other tax photo is much more clear. And it really looks to me, the other larger signs are lit from above at that time, but the sign here looks like it was some sort of a neon or had some pin lettering or something of that sort. And the extension from the building is actually much more in keeping with the spirit of the Bowery in this particular area, as opposed to the vertical sign, because people are trying to capture the attention of everybody. And I think you can even see in the tax photo that you have the base for the elevated train tracks that used to run up and down. And that, was why some of those signs stuck out at that time. As far as the lighting, I mean, I couldn't agree more that lighting isn't in. I'm not sure what is, but I know that isn't. And that's really, I think Brian had a good description of that, but the lighting, it would be nice to capture something a little different. I'm hoping that the replacement windows, even though they're not the purview here, it looks like you're putting back in quite a bit more color into the windows. And I'm not sure, but it looks like from what you put in that there's more patterned glass in the windows than there are today. And so
so the mosaic glass is, as you can see over time, it's actually been reduced. So in the approved glass coloring at the staff level by Landmarks, we will also have colored glass in the upper transom on the top two courses on both the south and north storefront. And then we will have this mosaic colored glass at the bottom two courses for both the north storefront as well as the south storefront. As you can see here, south storefront, this symbolizes the mosaic glass that will go in the bottom two courses, which it currently does not have. And we will have solid colored red glass, alternating red glass at the top transom. And then the same thing for the larger north storefront as well.
Then you had indicated the signage that you say is existing. That's, I think, to the retail store. What you've had in your plans, I'm not sure what page that was, but there's it also seems to be a blade sign in the for what you say is existing. It's not on this. That's not actually what was designated. That's not in the designation. There's a triangular sign that's in the designation. I'm not saying it's what's supposed to be there or not, but I'm just not clear what your signage is going to be for what was the hotel lobby, but it's now going to be a retail space. And so I'm just curious how that retail space is going to be presented, forward facing to the public within the historic, even though the use is changing, but how that's going to change, because I think that's an important.
So the signage that goes above the retail storefront is not part of this application because currently we do not have a retail tenant. Once a retail tenant is secured, then they'll put together their own presentation in terms of what they would like to have as signage for their storefront.
I'm just looking at the LPC 12.01. Is that the page? How do I find the page on here that you had presented? Also 7, sorry. If you look on 7, just had some language with respect to that sign. It says new retail hanging sign for regulations. So
yeah, we're not. We will not be installing a retail sign again, considering we do not have a retail tenant, and that will not be part of this.
I understand that, but my concern is that you're putting this lighting in. You're doing a lot of changes to the facade, and all of these in their totality really go to, I think, what Albert was speaking of significant change, and that's, while much of this work has already been done at staff level, I think one of the things for us is really what is the overall presentation on the street when you walk by. And I think that, Albert's been walking by it a lot longer than I have, but it really has had a particular feel and a particular look. And I think that, you know, many of these changes while going through landmarks preservation review, the summation of them is actually a removal in the end of some of the holistic. So that's why I just bring those up. And that's where the lighting is an issue. And, you know, and this has always been a challenge in for many, many decades along the Bowery is how do you light the street? But, you know, just simply putting up lights, you know, which is what was done in some buildings, just doesn't really fit into you know, match what's in the historic district. And now that it's designated, which I think the intent was to ensure, you know, that there's some maintenance of the older look and feel. I think that these have to be looked at in context. And I, you know, while I don't necessarily object to the small hotel signage plaque that's along the street level, in some ways, I think that if there was a little more emphasis on that and less on the signage above, it might just with the box signs not fitting in to the space, if there's more activity on that lower sign. I don't know. There's something how it all
Yeah,
fits together.
we'll discuss this more during
Yeah.
business session, but I think we all probably share a sense that the signage presents a very nice opportunity to allude to the history of the Bowery, and that the signage, you know, could be a nice opportunity to tie what you're doing into the history within the district. But, you know, we will discuss that further in
It
our
also
business
says
session.
on your drawing, new retail hanging sign for regulations.
That's what Carter was
That's
saying.
the same hanging one you're talking about?
Yeah, no,
But it's not
that's,
shown, we don't know what it is, right?
Well,
So
yeah,
that's
that-
just hold it. Okay, I didn't realize.
It's not
that.
part of the application
Gotcha.
because it'll depend on the tenant, I
Okay.
guess. Right?
and then just, you know, there are also plenty of buildings here that have wood doors, you know, with other facades in the spaces. And my concern is that the metal door actually, again, takes away material, you know, the material sense from what is there. I mean, the fact that, you know, many of the buildings which have been untouched, of which this is to some extent one, it sort of had patch repairs over the years, but you know, those are the elements of the historic fabric that you see that are still there. But the wood doors is something that you find throughout the older historic retail storefronts in the area that were not changed prior to designation. So in fact, I just saw somebody around the corner spending, you know, extensive time with the wooden doors and actually removing them and replacing, I believe, one of them with another wood door to match what was there. So a lot of these little elements are adding up, and I'm sure you'll discuss them during the business session, but those are, I guess, my concerns with this.
All right, great. Thanks, Carter. Thank you.
Yeah, just to remark on the doors. Ultimately, the existing doors were painted black, and when we replace them, they will also be painted black. So you won't really see the wood finish materiality really come through since it's painted a solid black color.
Yeah, but that's not true. You feel a wood door is a wood door and a steel door is a steel door. They feel different, they act different, they touch different, their temperature is different. Am I right, Brian? Right, thank you.
But no mistaking it.
No mistaking it.
Okay, let's move to the public. Would anybody from the public like to speak? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, Anne, Eugene will,
And I will promote you to a panelist so that you can, if you choose, you can turn on your camera and ask your question. Please accept the change in your status, and then you should rejoin the conference. Hi, Anne. So you can go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. At the risk of sounding like an idiot, I live near this. I live about 2 blocks, I think, from this place. So I do see it every day. The words that were stuck for me were old and elegant and rectangle. But can you go back to what you said, that tax photo? The one with the brick and the white? It was like the beginning of the photos. It is there, yeah. And I can see on the whiteness, if that white hurts your eyes like it hurts mine, maybe you could soften it to a cream or to an ivory, but that is very clearly what it is, and it is very clearly white. Maybe you can deal with that shading or that tone it, change the tone without changing the color. But I also heard what Anita said about the glass doors. That is a very nice look. It's a very airy, spacious look. It's all 100% glass door. Somebody took the glass door and replaced it with wood. It makes it heavier, it's denser, and it's not as airy and spacious as you have on your original photo. Can I go to the one about the blade sign? The sign, I believe might be number 4 or number 3. The sign. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, and there's a slide after that. The slide after that, yeah, okay. Now, okay, and then go back to the other one, the green one. Yeah, okay. I mean, to tell you the truth, that is a very 60s Peter Max modern thing, which frankly, I can't even read it. It took me quite a while to figure out that it said NOW. And if someone's trying to find your place, or they're going to stare at that for hours trying to figure out what exactly it means or it says. And there's no way you're going to tell me that's historic. That is a Peter Max thing that is just not historic. But if you go, can you go to the next one? The next, yes. Okay, yeah. Now, when you look at the Jade Hotel, you look at the letter J, you see the length in the letter J and the swing on the letter H. That is elegant. And that, frankly, is a rectangle. The letter J on Jade is a rectangular shape. When you go to NOW, it's uniform. It is not very rectangular. It is more toward the square. And as it moves more toward the square, it's no longer historic. That's pretty clear that the older lines were longer and the newer lines are shorter. And then the one about the light, number 3 was the light. Yeah, that is the thing that they put on the submarine, and it turns red and it spins round and round and round and round when the submarine is preparing to dive. That is a very modern thing. It came from the Space and Aeronautics program. It is not historic, and I don't even think it's meant to be a street light. We want to look at something that's old, possibly cast iron, a pewter, a bronze, much darker than that. Something that's elegant. It's too shiny. It's not elegant, and it's too short to be a rectangle. The older lines are longer and darker. And that light, I've seen it before. It's the light they show when the nuclear plant is about to explode. It goes round and round and round and it turns red. So those are just things that come to my mind where you're leaving the vocabulary. You want to stay old and elegant and rectangle. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anne. Is there anybody else from the public who would like to speak? All right, I don't see anybody. So thank you, James, and thank you for having such a clearly organized presentation. Appreciate that.
Thank you all.
Yeah. All right, so we will move to 51 Barrow Street. The application is to repair double hung window, construct a 5-foot horizontal extension in the rear, construct a non-visible rooftop terrace, add non-visible mechanical equipment, and partially excavate at the rear yard. So will the presenter please? Hi, Jacqueline, how are you?
Hi. I should have just changed it to Jackie. We don't have to be so formal. We go way
hi,
back.
Jackie.
Hi. Can everyone hear me okay?
No problem.
Okay, let me know if you need me to be loud, okay? Thank you. I'm sorry that I can't be there in person tonight. And thank you for having this meeting tonight. We appreciate your time, especially in the summer. Again, my name is Jackie Puduvallin of JPD Preservation Consulting. I'm here tonight with the architect, Peter Miller of Palette Architecture. He's sitting in the back. So he's here to answer questions after I go through the full presentation. So I better share my screen. Why am I forgetting how to do this? Hold on.
It's like riding a bicycle. You'll get it.
I know. Okay, I see it. I see it. Okay. Okay, can everyone see 51 Barrow Street?
Good.
Great. So I just want to clear up what the scope of work is that we're asking you to look at tonight. Certain things that you mentioned in your description are actually being handled at staff level. So what is actually being presented at public hearing to the Landmarks Commission and what we need you to weigh in on tonight is the following. So the proposal is to rebuild the entire rear facade, to construct a rear addition, including at the top floor. We're proposing to bump out the top floor a little bit. And at the roof, to level the roof so that a rooftop deck can be installed, and as well as approving a rooftop mechanical equipment, a bulkhead for a stair, and some mechanical equipment and railings. So really, you're just looking at the rear facade and the roof. There is a limited scope of excavation, but that excavation meets staff level rules. It's really just excavating a few feet where this addition, in front of where this addition would be in the back, and a little bit of the rear yard to create a terraced rear yard. But again, that meets commission rules, so you won't be asked to weigh in on excavation, and certainly not excavating under the house at all. So to move on. So this house is located on the south side of Barrow between 7th Avenue South and Bedford. As you can see in the block plan, no portion of the rear of the house would be visible from a public thoroughfare because there are buildings right behind it. And its view corridor is also blocked by buildings as you go towards 7th Avenue South. Here's the house viewed looking east toward the other houses that were built as part of the same row between 1824 and 1826. When constructed, the houses between 51 to 41, so 41 being the little house you see toward the end, all the way to the left, these were all built as 2.5-story federal style houses with on a raised basement, the way 51 still is. But in the late 19th century, 4 of the houses were expanded by a floor being added, and the rear additions also being added onto those houses, which we'll show you later in the presentation. I'm pointing this out because these alterations speak to the fact that number 51 has lost its relationship to the rest of its original row. Here are existing condition photos of the roof and the rear facade. Please note the rear facade has already been highly altered by the removal of window openings, the installation of window openings in an irregular arrangement. An eave was added that overhangs the roof in a strange way, not typical. The rear facade has been clad in wood shingle, and a 2-story L was added, which has also since been stuccoed over. So the finish on that 2-story L is stucco. Here are additional photos of the existing rear. It's hard to get a full shot of this rear facade in one photo because the rear yard is very small. And here's that very small rear yard in question. It's a postage stamp. So one of the, there are structural issues with the existing rear facade. One of the challenges of this project is that there's concern for the structure of the rear wall, which is not currently connected to the party wall on the right or east side of the house. Nearly a quarter of the live load of the house bears on a single point of the party wall and rear facade, neither of which would meet current structural standards for this type of load. Probes were done at the rear facade to determine the structure, to determine its structure and condition. The rear facade is constructed of wood studs with fire brick infill, with wood shiplap siding that's been covered with wood shingle. Aside from the lot line walls, there's only one pier on the rear facade to bear the live load of the interior floors. The dimension of the pier is undersized and not properly braced to the lot line walls. So serious intervention may be necessary at this facade, whether or not a rear addition was being contemplated. And we are in the process of getting a full report on this from an engineer. Unfortunately, that would not be ready in time for this meeting. But again, we do have the architect here to answer further questions on this after we go through the presentation. So here are axons to show the proposed work and sort of in context. On the left would be the existing aerial view. On the right, you can see the proposed changes at the roof and at the rear facade, and how the rear alteration will line up with the rears of the other houses that were part of this original row. Here are the existing and proposed roof plans. The existing roof is pitched, which you can see indicated here by there's a ridge line there. And this is the dormer that you see at the front of the house, the single dormer. The proposal is to level the roof at the rear to be able to install a usable roof deck to be accessed by the new stair bulkhead. On the left, you can see the rear extension in the plan, which would extend 4 foot 2 inches. You see that here. So that would be the rear deck of the addition below the roof. Here are existing and proposed sections through the roof. On the bottom is the proposed section. The red dotted line overlaid on the bottom section indicates the existing building envelope. You can see how the roof is proposed to be leveled and the top floor rear facade extended by about 30 inches. The proposed bulkhead will be a modest 7 feet tall with a slanted roof to prevent it from being visible from the street. Because of the location of the existing stair inside the house, the bulkhead would have to be constructed very close to the rear facade. And you can see the perimeter railings, which of course would be 3 foot 6 inches, and the mechanical units that would be 4 foot 6 inches. This is the building section, also giving you the existing sightline study. And here's the proposed building section and sightline study with the existing building envelope again overlaid with a red dotted line. You can see at the top floor the leveling of the roof and the pushing out of the top floor rear facade by 30 inches. And you can see the proposed 3-story full width addition, which will project slightly less into the rear yard than the existing 2-story L currently projects. Here are photos of the mock-ups installed at the roof, looking east and west. Here are photos taken from Barrow Street with the mock-ups in place. You can see that no portion of the work is visible. Here are additional mock-up visibility photos taken from 7th Avenue South and from Commerce Street. Please note that the orange netting that you see in the photo on the left, that's a mock-up on top of 43 Barrow. So 51 Barrow cannot be seen from 7th Avenue, and that orange netting has nothing to do with us. And again, the work at the roof would not be visible from any public thoroughfare. Here are the existing and proposed rear elevations. Here's the existing, again, on the left, you can see that this rear elevation has already had an extensive history of alterations, including changes in window size and placement, recladding, and again, that oddly overhanging eave. Now here is the proposed material palette, the proposed red brick for the new rear facade, cedar wood fencing, brick pavers, and what the frames of the proposed large window openings would look like. Here is the existing and proposed rear yard plans. In blue, you see the area of proposed excavation. Again, it would in no way entail going any deeper than the existing footings of the house, and it would just be related to where the addition is proposed and where they want to create a terraced rear yard, so that you'd have a bit of rear yard that you'd walk out into from the new ground floor doors. So this is the existing rear elevation in context with its neighboring buildings. So again, it's next door to a very large apartment building, and the house next to it has already had its rear facade entirely rebuilt and pushed out. This is the proposed in context. So again, restoring punched openings to the top floor rear facade where you don't have them now. You have that mismatch juxtaposition of different shapes and placement of windows. So this creates a regularized facade, including where you have these large window openings at the lower floors. Here, this is a plan to give you context for how the additions on this house would line up with the neighboring houses. Again, the rear facades of all of these houses that were originally part of this house's row have all been bumped out already. So originally, I think we can look at 49 Barrow here that I'm circling. 49 Barrow would most likely have had the either something close to or the original footprint that all of these houses had. And what you're seeing here is the proposed bumping out of the top floor rear facade of 51. This portion here where my arrow's going, that's the terrace you'd see at the full width addition. And then below, you can see a barbecue here. So this would be the rear yard. That's the portion of the rear yard being excavated. And you can see how the full width rear addition would line up with the existing rear addition of 47, which again, itself has been already added to, and you can see how the remaining three houses have already been added to at the back. So for more context, the architect did these elevation drawings to show you what the rears of all the houses, remaining houses in the row look like. So these are the backs of all the houses on Barrow Street as currently existing. This is 51, our subject house over here. And you can hopefully see how the other houses have changed over time. I tried to show in the previous slide how they've already been added to, they've already been bumped out. So none of these rear facades are original. None of them bear relationship anymore to the rear facade of 51. There's no continuity that someone could say they're trying to preserve anymore. And I'd also want to point out that these other rear facades also feature very, very large glazed openings. These are the houses across the rear yard. These are the houses facing onto Commerce Street. And we just wanted to show you how they've been altered as well. This house at number 15 has a full width addition. This house here has very large glazed openings. So we think that the changes we're proposing here for 51 Barrow would still be in context with the mix of additions that are already present within this block. Here's some aerial views looking down into the interior of the block to give you more of a sense of what's there. I know it's kind of hard to see with the trees and flower. Additional photos looking at the buildings opposite the rear yard of this building. These are some Sanborn maps to show us over time how the interior of this block has changed. You can see starting in 1895 that it was really a more homogeneous block of all of houses. By the 1920s, sorry, let me go below to 1904 in the bottom left first. By here, you can see some additions popping up with the use of let's see. Yes, the addition pops up at the back of 51. And by 1921, you can see where the apartment buildings have been introduced. Some of the other houses have gotten larger rear additions, including where it says notes 3-story rear additions. And by 1951, those same large additions are present over here at 45 and 43. The footprint of number 47 Barrow has changed from what it looked like originally. And this is the current proposed block plan, which highlights for you in a sort of gray color where there are currently roof decks, and a dark, the darker greenish gray color where there's currently mechanical equipment, in the pinkish color where there's currently bulkheads, and rear decks, rear additions. Decks on top of additions. So existing and proposed building sections for comparison on one sheet. These are just details for the construction of the proposed new rear wall. Details for the proposed windows. And a close-up elevation of the proposed reconstruction of the rear top floor rear facade. Again, this would really return what was probably the original appearance of this rear facade at this floor, with a wood cornice, simple wood cornice, also restored here, and these punched openings. And this is a rendering to show what the proposed rear would look like. And just to also point out where we've seen other comparable approvals within the district. Up on top is 75 and 77 Jane. These were two houses which had a similar situation whereby both of these houses that had highly altered rear facades and very damaged top floor rear facades. So the commission approved these very modern rear additions and the reconstruction of the top floors, which, sorry that you can't really see in this rendering. But you'll note they also approved these large glazed openings as well. Below is 11 Commerce Street, where you can see another bulkhead was approved that almost touches the rear facade. Here's 9 St. Luke's Place and 123 Washington Place, two other proposals where the commission approved full width rear additions with very large glazed openings and a little bit of excavation in order to access a newly terraced rear yard. And that is it. That's our proposal. We thank you for your time. And again, the architect is sitting right behind you to answer your questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Does anybody have any questions, first of all? Brian, why don't you start?
I think this is a moot point, but when I went by and took a picture from Arrow Street, there was orange netting at the front corner of the building, and wonder if that was wind blown or what was that all about?
I'm sorry, did you say you could see it from the front of the house? Or
Yes.
were you on Barrow Street?
Yes.
That must have been wind blown. It was just free loose netting on the rooftop.
Kind of looked pretty disheveled, loose netting, yes.
Yeah, it must have. It wasn't attached to any plywood, I mean, any.
Well, let's see. Let me see if I can find it.
We're certainly not proposing anything near the front of the house.
Yeah, well, that's
netting that blew off.
Yeah, there seems to be a post and that sort of thing.
That's another house.
That's not 50.
No, we're the smaller house. So that's coming off of the top of another building.
It's next to the apartment
Yeah.
building. On the right
Okay.
side.
So your house has the black shutters?
No,
No, that's not it either.
no, this is the image here. It has no shutters.
Okay. Well,
I think it was 3-bedroom. The other one.
Which has that
Yeah.
maximally visible,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from all of the illustrations, it looked like everything would meet the criteria, so that's why it seemed awfully strange, like there was a railing there or something, so since that's not the case, then everything seems to be in good condition. The dormer on the front, what is the condition of that? And is that going to be replaced or rebuilt or anything like that? That's going to be intact?
Proposed work to the front facade, with the exception of what Jackie mentioned. At the cellar level, there is an air conditioner unit coming through the window. We're proposing to remove that and replace the double bunk window. Aside from that, there's no proposed work on the front facade.
Are you removing that unit on the right side? Isn't there a mechanical equipment?
There's no
Up against
mechanical
the-
equipment on the roof right now, aside from plumbing venting. I guess that's not mechanical.
I guess I saw that in the photograph here you showed me. Okay.
All right, is that it, Brian, for you? Anita, have you got something?
I think we might want to ask a little bit more about the excavation. I mean, this must be a very old building from the 1820s, is that correct? 28, 20, something like
Jackie,
that?
what's the exact date?
1826.
26.
But again, the only excavation would be underneath where the proposed addition is. And it would be this small portion of the rear yard where they basically be creating a terraced rear yard. So there would be no excavation under the main house.
All right, but
And-
there's a cobble, rubble wall, foundations, and so on. So again, it's our job just to point out that this is something that is going to affect your neighbors if you're not careful.
Yeah, we certainly don't want underpin. We're highly aware of the complexity of that, and we're strictly trying to avoid that in every way. There is already a terraced portion to the rear yard, so the amount of excavation we're talking about is on the order of a couple of feet in most places.
Okay. Yeah, it's, the lot is 20 by 40 basically, so it's a
It's
really
very
tiny building, yeah.
Yeah.
And you have the good fortune. I do want to say, I appreciate the fact that you really shaped the addition so that it was not visible.
Yeah.
And it's like you didn't go part way, you went all the way, and I appreciate that. Thank you. So that's, I'm fine.
Okay. Albert, do you have anything you'd like to say?
I would like to see the front elevation again. That didn't somebody question the dormer, whether that remains? If there's any change?
Brian just asked about that. They're just gonna repair it, I guess.
But we're not even doing that. We're not doing anything.
No
There's
change
nothing
to the-
within what's before us on the front facade, Albert. The scope of work that we're reviewing is entirely in the rear and on the roof.
Right.
Okay. Okay, this, it was established that the construction was in 1826, correct?
Yes.
Okay, it's 100 years older than I am. And it's in much better shape.
Oh,
I disagree.
no.
All right,
No way.
all right. Thanks, Albert. Is there anybody from the public who wishes to speak? All right, I don't see any raised hands.
It's like a little dollhouse.
Yeah,
It's a
it's-
very sweet little building.
All right, thanks.
Very
Jackie.
adorable.
I think that does it.
Yes, thank you.
Very clear presentation.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would you
Should I
sign?
stop? Okay. Should I stop sharing?
Oh, yeah, you want to sign?
We're all done, thanks.
You signed in? That's it. Oh, you did. Perfect.
Okay.
The owners?
We are going to move on
To, in the auction.
Yeah.
44
Thank you.
Jane Street.
Good luck with everything. You're lucky.
Thank you so much.
Oh, no, Jane Street.
Hello, everyone.
Main Street.
Okay, we're moving to 44 Jane Street. The application is to reconstruct a 3-story high rear extension and create a new rooftop addition to the house.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Povero from Povero and Company, architects here in New York. And let me get this shared. Are you all seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so we're looking at 44 Jane Street, which maybe I'm prejudiced, but I think it's one of the prettiest blocks in Greenwich Village Historic District. So we are looking at a two major parts to this project that we're presenting to you. One is the reconstruction of the rear yard addition, three-story rear yard addition, and the other is a rooftop addition. So I thought the easiest way to go through this would be to kind of break those two parts, and then we can talk about the whole thing as a whole. One thing I will point out is that we've been working at staff level with Landmarks about the restoration of the facade. And mostly what you will see walking by will be the removal of the fire escape, because the house is going from two-family to single-family again. But I'm happy to answer questions about the other restoration work that's being handled at staff level as needed. Just to give you some context, it's on Jane Street between 8th Avenue and Hudson on the south side of the street. Oh, the interesting thing about Jane Street and a few of the streets in this part of the village is they do run due east-west. So the house faces true north and true south. Unusual in Manhattan, of course. This is the row. This is looking south at the row. And from what we've been able to establish, the row of houses that was built by, we think, the same builder, was built from the west to the east. About 1842 at number 50 and 52 to 1846, which is at 44 Jane. And one of the interesting things that we've been working with staff to try to determine, it's very possible that in that era, as the buildings were built, the style in Manhattan for houses of this type was moving from the Greek Revival to the Italianate. So 44 Jane, as you can see, indicated here, has an Italianate cornice. It has 2/2 windows at the second and third floor, large 1/1, old, we don't know if they're original, but they're certainly very old wood windows at the parlor, as well as an Italianate double door instead of the single door with side lights. But at the same time, it still has the Greek Revival brownstone surround around the door, and most of the interiors, which are not obviously subject to this review, but most of the interiors still hold a lot of that Greek Revival character. So it's likely that either as the row was built, the fashions changed and they decided to update it, or it happened in the years following. The important thing to note here is that, looking here at the three tax photos, is that the Italianate cornice is about 2 feet taller than the cornice of 46 Jane next door and the rest of the row. So it does have a taller cornice, but you can also see that the window heads and sills aligns as you go west. And the other interesting thing about these tax photos, besides seeing the Abingdon Square building in the background, is that on the far left, there is a building that was at the corner of Jane Street and 8th Avenue that is no longer there. That's where the Jane Street Garden is. That's the gun in the first act going off in the third. That's an important part of this, of what we're looking at here, is that missing building. This is just an overview of the existing section on the left and the proposed section on the right. And I bring this up to show, sorry?
We're not seeing this guy.
We're stuck on your first page here. We're stuck on page 1.
Oh dear. Let me try to fix, have you not seen anything that I've talked about?
Well, we know what you're doing.
Okay, what are we seeing now?
Now we're on page 3.
Great. This is the row. These are the tax photos that we talked about, the 2 foot high, 2 foot taller cornice, just to give you. Now we're at the sections?
Yes.
Great. So we're looking at the reconstruction of the rear yard extension and a rooftop addition. So those are the two parts of the project that we're focusing on today. And I'll go back to these sections, so you don't need to necessarily look at them now. I just wanted to give you some context of where we were looking at. So the first thing I want to go over was the rear yard extension reconstruction. And I'll point out this is not visible from any public way. So this is one part of it. And what we're looking at is what's currently an addition on the back of extension on the back of the house that we're basically reconstructing. And we're reconstructing it to be able to connect the parlor floor to the garden floor. And just to give you a sense of the interesting thing about this rear yard extension is that it's at the same height of other rear yard extensions along the row. The interesting thing about this one is that it is raised up on iron columns. So there is this void underneath it. So what actually triggered having to go to a full commission review, because typically this would be able to be handled at staff level, but it's this sort of filling in of this question was a question, and they really wanted to get community board input as well as the commission's input, because it's a little bit of an interesting use of the space. The other thing, so looking at that rear yard addition, this is the 1854 Paris map. So this would have been very soon after the building was built. And all along the row, you see that yellow indicated, meaning those were wooden additions, probably T-porches along the rear of this Jane Street row. Already by 1862, its neighbor at 46 Jane and 54 Jane had been changed from a wood frame to masonry. And over time, the rest of the row, except for 44 Jane, was infilled with masonry rear yard additions. The current state is that here we are at 44 Jane has a 3-story addition, and I use 3-story addition to mean the actual height of it, even though it's actually 2 stories kind of floating over the basement. 3-story addition here. The 46 Jane next door is also a 3-story addition. There's 3 2-story rear yard extensions, and then another 3-story at 54. And then along 8th Avenue, there is a 3-story extension at number 15. The conditions in the rear yard on the left, 52 and 50 Jane have the 2-story additions, but they're both in masonry, in one case exposed, in the other case covered in stucco. 46 Jane, which is the project's neighbor to the west, is a full brick 3-story high addition, which you may have seen last year. It went through this process last year, and it's currently under construction. That 46 Jane rear facade sort of sticks out into the rear, into the donut by a few feet from this on the right, which is 44 Jane, the subject property. And these other 2 images show what the rest of the interior of that court looks like. These are the back of the 8th Avenue buildings, which are stucco. And one of those 8th Avenue buildings has a 3-story high brick rear yard extension. What we did early on was do some significant work to try to see if there was any intact elements of the old T-porch. So we took off, there was 3 layers of additional material that had been put on this over time. One was basically sort of a shiplap siding on top of, you can see where maybe original openings had been, but it had been covered by siding at one time. Then it was covered in sort of asphaltic material, and then finally in aluminum siding. So there were 3 layers, and we didn't find any evidence of any kind of details or shaped sills, or the things we would expect to find if there was an intact T-porch hidden in there. So it looks like they just sort of shaved it off and covered it with these other materials. The way the rear facade reads now is very similar to what we looked at in the last project, a hodgepodge of openings and this aluminum siding that kind of covers the whole thing up. These 2 paired windows do not appear to be original, but they are at least old. That are sort of centered on the center line of the parlor, but otherwise we're looking at a bunch of double hung aluminum windows that were a much later vintage. At the top of the 3rd floor of the house, you can see that There's a significantly damaged but intact brick facade. It's missing lintels. It's has some sill issues, but it's still there. It has the original wood cornice, and that aligns with the rear facade. The interesting thing is Jane Street changed quite a bit. The Jane Street facades got changed over time, but the rear cornice stays fairly consistent, with the exception of 48 Jane, which looks like it lost its wood cornice, but still has the corbelled brick that would have sat underneath the wood cornice. Now, our proposal, on the left, you can see the existing elevation in its context of its neighbors. And on the right is our proposed elevation. And the complicating thing here is that we are moving to a masonry construction from a wood frame construction. And the architectural language of that, of course, as you know, is different. So we looked at how to acknowledge the change from wood to masonry, but also the fact that this is a very tight corner in the inside of the block. So what we chose to do from a design point of view is to emphasize the center line of the parlor, the front parlor and rear parlor that connect through the house, and create a center line that recenters the rear facade on that parlor, with a tripartite opening on the basement level or the garden level, another tripartite opening on the parlor level, and a paired opening above, indicating public spaces and bedrooms. And the interesting thing is that we proportioned the lights of these windows based on the extant wood windows in the existing, the only little bit of wood windows that was left in the existing wood addition. The other thing that's interesting here, and I'll go to this rendering, it'll be helpful, is on the materiality is that we referenced the brownstone base on Jane Street, but as it moves to the back of the house, it becomes a more humble material of brick. And then above that, the rest of the addition is clad in stucco that brings it in harmony with the houses that are around it. And then we've taken in this case, it is cast stone to match as closely as possible of the brownstone to create water tables, string courses, sills, and lintels, so that we're bringing a little bit of that character through, but taking it to a more humble place, which is what would have been typical for a rear facade. And to note that the third floor, the top floor, remains brick we are replacing the missing lintels with that same cast stone to match the brownstone lintels and restoring the existing wood cornice. This is an interesting, we had to do a lot of work to try to make this look realistic because this is such a tight corner that this facade will probably never be seen this way. And, but this is what you would see if there were nothing on 8th Avenue. And this is showing that tight corner. So these are the back of, there are apartment buildings, former houses that are apartment buildings on 8th Avenue. Here is the rear extension. It's the same, it's the same size as what is there now, just it's been reconstructed. And just to see how it works in plan, this is what I was talking about, that center line of the double parlors that comes back through the house and becomes, this is the existing rear masonry wall, and this becomes the organizing principle behind the tripartite window. And so existing, there's 2 small bedrooms in the rear. What it's going to be replaced with is a double height space that goes down to the garden level and a curving stair. And again, we take that center line. This is on the basement floor, the garden floor. We take that center line through the house that organizes the rear facade. So that's the rear facade, the rear yard extension. The rooftop addition is a little bit of a different problem. So this block has Jane Street to the north, West 12th Street to the south, Hudson to the west. Now 8th Avenue comes in almost at a 45-degree angle. What that does, it's a combination of that sort of cut through the block, as well as the loss of the building at the corner of 8th and Jane years ago to fire, which is now the beautiful Jane Street garden. We knew going into this that anything built on the roof, even standing on the roof, you're visible from different places around this block. So we decided to approach the design of a rooftop addition not to try to make it go away, because there really is no way to do so. Those of you who know this part of 8th Avenue, these buildings are quite low. So there was no way to really hide it. So then we started to say, let's design it for visibility. And we looked at what elements on the roof in the Greenwich Village Historic District add to the historic district instead of detracting from the historic district. And you all know the answer to this. It's these beautiful studio windows and these atelier skylights and these things that really speak to how these buildings were adapted in the 20th century for artist studios. And, you know, both new and old, when you look up at the street and see these windows, you don't think, oh, they ruined it. You think, oh, that's beautiful. So we looked at a couple that were close, not necessarily the best or worst examples, but ones that were closest to 44 Jane. So 44 Horatio, which is just a block to the north, has a quite visible studio window, and it's visible particularly because there's a park across the street. So it's easy to get a little bit of distance from it. But even so, it's sort of in between the front of the facade and where that stair would probably be coming up. The interesting thing about this one is the studio window comes up at an angle and then it goes straight back in a flat roof. At 327 West 4th Street is not quite a studio window. And again, I'm looking at houses that are close. This is just around the corner from the Jane Street project. Is because of the way that 8th Avenue, Jane, and West 4th come together, this was another example of an addition that was going to be visible no matter what they did. So the choices were made to angle it back, to create a sense of a roof, and to break up a little bit of the way that roofscape works. And then lastly, a very controversial one is 65 Horatio Street. And again, this is going to be visible no matter what because it has that side lot. And so were there a building here next to it, it probably wouldn't have been a terribly controversial thing, but because it's quite visible, during the process, it went from being this sort of very modern and glassy, boxy addition to a studio window type addition along here. But again, this goes straight back and creates somewhat of a bulky view on the side, but this is under construction right now. I would point out that our neighbor to the west, which is 46 Jane Street, had this addition approved on its roof. It's just basically a simple gable roof set in the middle of the building. It does have a large elevator bulkhead to the rear. But what we decided to do is we looked at this dimension, which is 12'3", which is the dimension from the top of the cornice to the top of their addition. And what we really wanted to do as a goal when designing the rooftop addition at 44 Jane was to use that as our benchmark, try to be as close to 12'3" as possible so that the rooftop addition of 44 Jane would feel in keeping with 46 Jane. And I also know that so much of what worries you guys and worries LPC as well is you're creating precedent, and you want to make sure that when you're doing so, that you're creating a sense of consistency and that you're able to feel like any kind of addition, especially something that might be visible, feels like it belongs. So here, I'm going back to that section that we spoke of. This is the existing, and you have the taller cornice that slopes back up to the large parapet wall of the rear. There was a large void space created in that roof. This is not an unusual construction. And the original staircase running through. Our proposal basically takes that void space and uses as much of that as possible, and then creates a room that we're calling a solarium because it does have that large north-facing studio window. Sets that back from the facade so that it's not as much as possible not visible from Jane Street, but also aligns with the historic staircase running up. We also set it back from the rear facade because, as you'll see, where we have more of a visibility problem is from the rear, from the 8th Avenue side, and did what we could to tuck the mechanical equipment as far away from visibility as possible. So just a little bit more detail. The other thing that happens is that we have to be able to, we're hiding mechanical equipment within the roof as well. So instead of taking the roof, the studio window, instead of taking it straight back, which you saw in a lot of those other more modern examples, we taper the roof back as much as possible to get our clear head height with that interior equipment to reduce the height of that eave from the rear where it might be visible, or it's visible from West 12th Street. And this is this is a section through 46 Jane, which is the one that's under construction that was recently approved, existing on the left, and our proposed addition on the right to see the two of them in context. The interesting thing is you'll see that the peak of their roof and the peak of our roof, there is a difference between the heights of them, but the height of the top of our cornice to the top of our addition versus their cornice and their addition is within 6 inches of each other. So even though they are, they're about 2 feet different, they're relatively more like 6 inches different. The other thing, as you've, I'm sure, run into many times, is that in doing the addition, we have to extend the flues of the of our neighbors, and that'll be relevant because from Jane Street, that's really the one thing that's visible, are the flue extensions. It's just a plan. This the space is really a solarium on top with a front terrace and a rear terrace. The roof of the solarium does overhang to the south to decrease the heat gain of the directly south-facing facade. No one likes to see elevations that are flattened like this because they look very scary. But you'll notice that this is 46 Jane, this is our project. And then actually 42 Jane has a rooftop addition, but unlike the rest of the row, it has, the rooftop addition was sunk down into these eyebrow windows. And this was quite a while back, but it does fit into the context of rooftop additions at its east and west. From the rear, we moved all of the mechanical equipment as far west as possible, still aligning it with that center line. Maybe I'm just an architect that likes things to be on a center line, but moving it as far west as possible so that we reduce the visibility from 8th Avenue. We built a mock-up. This on the right, you can see the actual under construction of 46 Jane, and the orange is all the mock-up that we had built, which shows that sloping studio window on the north side. I also wanted to point out, it does show, this is the reconstructed masonry chimney, as well as the flue extensions at code mandated height here. So visibility. So when we built the mock-up, we realized there were 3 places that this had visibility. One, number A, is coming down Jane Street from a distance. And in particular, when you're standing basically in front of Monsignor or the Jane Street Tavern, when you look up at the building, there's a little bit of visibility there. I will also say, coming like farther down Jane Street, you know, halfway between Greenwich and West 4th, there may be some visibility, but the leaf cover is such that it's hard to see. But I think you'll get a sense of the visibility from that A point. B, which has the more significant visibility, is from what I think is one of the big West Village landmarks, which is the old Chase Bank ATM on 12th Street, which used to be the only ATM in the West Village. So from that exact spot, you look back up over the 8th Avenue buildings and you do see the rear of this addition. And then C, very hard to see, but if you're up against the building on Hudson and Jane, and you look back down Jane Street, there's a sliver of the studio window that is possibly visible. So what I'm showing here is, this is the mock-up looking from Monsignor, and the orange is the mock-up and the visibility that you can see of that studio window. And here I moved to the rendering showing what, this is the, I'll go back and forth so you can toggle. This is the mock-up versus the proposed. There appears to be a protest outside my window. Looking, here's the panorama of 8th Avenue from that corner in front of that Chase ATM, showing the tall building, and big building on Abingdon Square, the taller building on the corner, and these low row along 8th Avenue. And that orange is the proposed rooftop addition, and the visibility in the context of the stuff that's happening on the roof, there's chimneys, there's party walls and air conditioning units across that. Looking more closely, you can see this is an addition on 8th Avenue that partially blocks it. There's air conditioning units from 42 Jane, and that's the proposed rooftop addition, where you can see we sloped the roof back down to the minimum that we could to get all the equipment in to reduce that visibility as much as possible. And that's the height of the equipment, which is just, unfortunately, it is what it is. With looking at the other equipment, it's going to blend in, but nobody likes to see the equipment, but that's as far away from the corner as we could get it. And this is toggling back and forth to the rendering of what the rear would look like in the context. And like I said, that C point from the very, very far corner of Hudson and Jane, you can see a little bit of that studio window poking up above and toggling, just seeing a little bit of it. Difficult to see, but it is possible to see it. And like I mentioned, it's really the flue extensions that are visible from Jane Street and from the Jane Street garden. It's the only thing that's visible from the Jane Street garden. But I will point out there are other flue extensions visible along Jane Street as well. We looked at using our digital model to insert this roof addition in the context of its neighbors and the context of its block. And you can see here's the Jane Street, here's our 44 Jane project, there's the neighboring project and the existing roof additions nearby. And so you can see it in context with this row of 3 as well as the one behind it. And then some more detail about what that is. And like I mentioned, most of this is not visible, but the studio window they're steel windows with a zinc cladding on the sides and the roof. And it's set back from the facade so that none of this structure is visible from Jane Street. And there is a sort of a dormer bump out to be able to access the front terrace, but also not visible from Jane Street. On the rear, again, we sloped it back to get to an eave height that is, it isn't as tall as going straight back, but that allows us to put mechanical equipment inside the roof. The only thing that has to go outside of the roof is the condensing unit, which we did screen somewhat with a louvered screen wall that wraps around here. And this is helpful to see how tight that corner gets in here for the rear yard extension, but also just looking at how that rooftop works with its neighbors. And I would just point out this large elevator bulkhead that is at our neighbor at 46 Jane that is adjacent. That is all, and this is just a rendering of the facade with those flue extensions that some existing and some new. And you can see here the work that we're doing to restore the facade back to that Italianate mix of Greek Revival, Italianate sort of hybrid. The interesting thing, just a side note that I think you guys would be interested in, is the previous owners did a wonderful job of saving the parts of the iron fences and railings that had fallen off over the years. So the house, when the current owners bought it, came with a box full of original iron pieces, which we are having restored and sent, and being able to use those as molds for replacement and repair is really invaluable. And you rarely get that in a house, so it's going to be wonderful.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to just jump right into what I feel is clearly the most problematic part of this, which is the maximally visible vantage point of your B point of view. And if you could kindly give us the toggled rendered view there, I think I would like to make sure I understand fully what I am looking at. If you could perhaps zoom in even a little further so that we can all be clear on what aspects of this very contemporary looking, despite its atelier references, is visible from that point of view.
So that's, yes, that's a compliment. You are pointing out the hardest thing for an architect who loves historic reference points. You're pointing out the hardest part, which was we never see the rears of these things. And so the reference points end up being, in some ways, trying to do our best to mitigate the severity of the height and using the materials to help it blend into the context.
So what exactly are we looking at here?
So what we're looking at this is the eave line right here, where the zinc roofing comes down the sloped roof and comes down the facade, a portion of it. The zinc roofing comes down the full side. And what we're seeing is a stucco face and the underside, which is the ceiling of that setback, that sunshade setback. We're seeing the back window and we're actually seeing through it to blue sky, through to that atelier skylight, to that studio window. And then we're seeing, this is the air conditioning unit, and that's the louvered. The louver doesn't do a whole lot to block it from the street. I actually had the louver much higher and to completely block the unit. And it was staff's opinion that seeing the unit made more sense because you have other air conditioning units in this view than seeing a foreign louvered thing at the top. So now the louver just really blocks the unit from inside of the donut and from the terraces of the house itself.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it is really unfortunate that, you know, your kind of exposed rear, so to speak, is really hanging out there. And unfortunately, just on a gut visual point of view, really looks so contemporary. You know, and I think, you know, that's something we'll have to discuss in our business session, but that seems to me to be the real vulnerability of this whole presentation. So we'll go on to talk further. Anita, please.
Yeah, it sort of follows up, this view is unfortunate. It really does not look like a row house. It looks like a prison or something, you know, really out of sync with what should be on top of this little building. I think that I like very much the approach of blending in the rooftop with this, you know, the studio lights, skylights. But somehow I feel like you've dropped the ball because the view of the front facade are not divided into appropriate sizes. They're very square, very big, very modern, and I can see why a client would ask that, but that is not historic. It doesn't bring back the memory of it. In fact, it breaks the, is there a fourth wall? But it breaks the illusion that we want. And I think on the rear facade too, you could easily, maybe not that easy, but you could work it so that you would get, again, you could sell the skylight, the studio skylight in the rear facade and the front, and especially if you keep the memory of it correct and don't change the vertical divisions of it. That's the key to recalling that historic element.
I think that's a really excellent point, and it's something that LPC staff just gave me a note today on the same thing about that, the division of that north facade. So it was sort of a late breaking note from them as well. So that's something I really feel like is something that we should do is reproportion.
But you're almost there. And I think if you bring it to the back, because that is very unfortunate, that view, and you know, massage it, make it work for you. And it's very dramatic, the view, the reference you gave of, I forget the address, but where it was presented really square and then they just, we reviewed it and then they tilted it back. And it's just like, oh, okay. You know, the other one is just modern and
Boxy.
and it's very dramatic how a move like that changed it.
Makes a big difference.
Big difference.
Yeah, if I were to critique the final project, it would be the fact that there's this big blank wall on the side, which.
It was big what?
This big blank wall on the side, which that drives me crazy, but that's just,
Just the massing and the, you know, the trees and everything is good, music is good, and you go walk by, you go, oh, okay, okay. The other one, you go, oh, somebody put some money into that or whatever, you know. You're gonna notice that it's an intervention. And we don't want an intervention, we want you know, an addition that works.
I wonder if I could bounce an idea off of you guys. I'm wondering if what would really help this is if this got more articulation in the sense that it wasn't just these big planes, but actually had a little bit more of a sense of an eave, a little bit more of a sense of a little bit of an overhang or something that articulates it better. I think it might be severe.
I think you have to get away from the horizontal.
Yeah, that's.
I think you have to accentuate the vertical and maybe give it a little tiny slope. A little slope will break that squareness.
Yeah.
Is what's sticking up into the, you know, against the sky.
Yeah, if I can look at the section, I think that, you know, it slopes back here. I think maybe it's this vertical and the fact that there's a horizontal division there. And maybe this roofing just comes down and it looks more like it's part of the studio skyline, like it's part of the roof and less like it's a thing. And also.
It looks like a huge beam.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't think that's what you want it to look like, a rooftop.
Yeah, if the material doesn't change as it turns, then that way that corner is less visible.
Well, you try it out. I think you have to, you know, make a conscious effort to maybe change it more than you are saying right now. Thank you. That's it for me.
Brian?
I would go along with Anita's comments. That's the only thing that I felt needed work.
Anybody else? Carter?
Yeah,
Albert.
Albert!
I think the color is also a problem. I think it would be possible to have a color that blended.
Do you think, Albert, do you think darker might be helpful?
Yeah, with the structure, I think it's too light. That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Albert. All right, would anybody from the public care to speak? Doesn't look like it. So we will now go into our business session. So I think we have no more questions for you, Jeffrey. So thank you very much for your very clear presentation. I think, you know, it's fair to say we appreciate the difficulty of the physical situation, but, you know, we still can't override our concerns about your uniquely, maximally visible situation there. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, so
What happened to number 122 Macdougal?
Oh, no, they disappeared.
Oh, okay.
So we're not here.
So we write disappeared.
They're a vanishing.
They would die.
Boom. They're a vanishing act. Okay, so why don't we start with Jane Street since it's freshest. Let's start with the easy part, which is the rear addition, not the rooftop addition.
I think it's fine and it's completely not visible.
Yeah.
And it's not all metal and glass, so that's a plus.
Yeah.
Some actual wall there.
Yeah, I didn't have any issues with that, and I appreciate the restoration of the wooden cornice there. Would anybody else have any feelings about that? So we feel all, let's not leave you out, Albert. So even if we're not looking at you, speak up if you have anything to say.
Okay, I will.
Okay, good. And same for you, Eugene.
Okay.
I guess the rear is the only issue is the rooftop.
So,
Which is the big
okay, so we'll say we're all in agreement to approve the rear addition, yes? Okay. Now let's talk about that, what we want to do with the rooftop addition and how we will wish to handle that. I personally, this is just my personal opinion, feel that really the whole thing needs to go back to the drawing board. But I don't know how others feel about that.
Yes, we're working within two sight lines. The one from the front, they're hiding the visibility from the street.
You can never see anything from this. I don't know what that little diagram is for. You can't see anything ever.
But I mean, they formed it, they sloped it, and that is
Okay.
within the guidelines there. The back is not the same kind of sight line because for the back part, it is from a distance. So it's more like almost a horizontal shot. And so there's no hiding it. So it becomes, as you explained, the problem of how do you mold that mass so that it is as unobtrusive as possible? Toning down the color might be part of it, as Albert said, and sloping it and maintaining the vertical divisions on the glazing or the other details. And so I think that it just has to be explored further, and would have to say come back.
Yeah, I think, I do, because otherwise we're totally redesign, I mean, where it's not really up for us.
Well, we don't know what it's gonna look like.
redesign it. And,
Right,
you
we
know,
couldn't do that.
I don't think that's fair to anybody.
And it can be done, you know what I mean? It's very optimistic, I think, if we just bring back the memory of something historic and not a new, kind of construction.
Okay, so we will approve.
No, you're thinking, Brian, let me hear you.
We can't redesign it for them. It's too much of a change to just say, well, if you just hide this or put this a little lower, it's not that simple. So I don't think I don't get the impression that we could approve even conditionally what we saw.
Right.
Because of the visibility.
Right.
So I don't think we have a choice but to ask for that to be revised.
I agree. And the question I guess I would ask them is, it's a deny and ask for them to come back with a redesigned proposal. How do you guys feel about in that mentioning, some language about, grooming the massing, toning down the color, less emphasis on the horizontal and more historic reference, just as some general guidlines for what might be more acceptable. Is that going too far? Or do you
feel comfortable drafting something?
Well, not really, because I think it's just, I think we told them, and we really don't need to design it for them. But I do think that it should look more historic. I mean, maybe we shouldn't go into as much detail as that.
Just more historic.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, right now, to me, it really looks like the stuff you do in prison. Seriously,
No,
it looks like
that's
a
how I
prison
read it, too.
facade,
Yeah,
and that's unfortunate. We don't want that.
Wrong language.
It's the wrong language, and it may not really be that way, but from a distance, it does.
All of this is,
Like very Academia.
Speaking like it is, baby. I mean, I'm just trying to be straightforward, that that's what it looks like to me. And that's
All
not.
of this is because it's so fully visible.
Right. But, you know, it
There's
is.
no way to disguise that.
No, it needs to be, look, he can reference the skylights. They work very well. They look quite beautiful. Maybe you have to pick up on that on the rear facade. You just eliminate this floating, it's magic. That's not historic. A floating big vertical 20-foot wide beam is not a historic element in Greenwich Village. So instead, let's get something down to the ground. But I wouldn't go too crazy because we've expressed it in words here and Greg was very receptive to listening to us. So
We'll keep it simple.
keep it simple, yeah.
Stupid.
We get into,
Sorry, I just had to say that.
we
Okay.
get into trouble
Nothing personal.
otherwise.
Okay, so I think we're all in agreement there. So why don't we move, then we'll go back to the top here, 6583 West Houston, that's the graffiti stuff. I mean, I think I feel like that's fine, but I do think we should certainly specify that this is first floor only. Stuff. How do others feel?
It's fine. It's a good solution to a difficult problem.
That's a strong presentation.
Yeah, I thought so too. Yeah, it's a bad situation.
I always thought that it was a painted facade in the first place.
I did too, yeah.
I mean, the whole thing, not just the first, but, so, yeah, I think it's a good solution for a difficult problem.
Yeah.
Just one thing, please,
Yes.
please don't refer to them as graffiti artists. There are graffiti artists, but not the ones who hit this building.
Well, we're just referring to graffiti,
No
not.
judgment, we're not gonna get into our discussions of judgment on that, I think.
Versus non-art.
Without making artistic.
It's a very unusual building. I don't know how they got it approved anyway. Fire Blinder Bell really was in its heyday back then. They got everything, boom, boom, boom.
Fire in your bell.
Yeah, I was going to comment because on the Bowery at Spring Street is the old bank building. And they maintain the graffiti. In fact, they encourage more graffiti later added.
Yeah.
Oh, that's their, but that's the photographer who lives there. that guy.
Right.
Right.
And then,
That too can change. Right now it's a skateboard shop, that can change over time.
All right, so we know what we're doing there. Next, 338 Bowery. All right, this was the one, I think, that was problematic in several aspects. Why don't we just take it one aspect at a time? The first aspect is the painting of the second, third, and fourth window frames to black. Now, I think there's an overarching thing going on here, which is that, please correct me if I'm overstepping what others have expressed, but my sense is that we very much want to protect the history of the Bowery and, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and in certain aspects, and that this is such a nice opportunity to do something here where there can still be a place where there's a very attractive hotel, and yet there's recognition of the district, of the historic district, and one of the places, is in this painting of the second, third, and fourth
Well, it
floors.
feels really grim to me. I think the white is just more interesting and lighter and nicer. And if it's historic, I like it better. It just adds a little more life.
Right, and separation of the bottom from the.
And the building is kind of, feels a little heavy. So the white adds something good.
Bowery sent this
Yeah.
earlier rendering, where they were gonna keep it white. And
I think Carter did.
Sent photos, which I think Eugene,
Someone just now that was actually on the plywood in front of the space. Presumably their rendering of the project from December.
wasn't that interesting, where it's white?
so
Yeah, and it all.
No, I don't want to take credit.
It's interesting with the black fire escape sunlight. It looks like the historic photograph. And
Is that a render or what
Where did you get this?
Like AI?
from that was
Is that from the article on EV Grave?
one of the blog sites, and that's
I see.
actually the picture on the plywood front of the site.
Oh,
But I thought it was interesting because, I had sent, this site was designated a little later. So there actually are photographs of each of the buildings as part of the designation report. And the designation report shows some of the hodgepodge colors that it was painted, but there's a long struggle here with the ownership, and it really I don't think it's produced income at a level that is helpful to taking over the building. In fact, I think that the ground lease owner, the person who, this is a net lease for a 99-year lease, I believe. The ground owner said he wouldn't have bought it. I believe he's quoted as saying somewhere he wouldn't have bought it if he knew it was going to be landmarked. Because the plan was actually redevelopment, this was in the early 2000s, not the person now. I gave some sort of a long lease, but now that it's going to maintain its historic use, going back, I think, to the 1940s tax photo when this was a hotel, or other words for hotel, stating that it was originally a dormitory, I think, for Bellevue Hospital in the 1800s. In the early 1900s, 1910s and 20s, it was purchased. They added the building next door.
Said it was a 1917 building.
Yeah, so I think that that's when it was combined.
But did you see the floor plan? The bedrooms are about, the size of a bed.
But that's what it has.
That's what it's gonna be for the 99 years, is that it?
Well, presumably that, they're able to, if they can change the
They're capsule
uses, but.
It's very modern now that I think
But
about
I
it.
think,
Like capsule sleeping.
there's a similar thing. I think it was 220 Bowery or 218 Bowery. There's another old SRO style hotel that.
Sunshine Motel.
It wasn't Sunshine, it was a different one, but it was formed a race car driver had bought it. Thousands.
Susan, I need to go back to usage.
Come sit here where we can hear you better, maybe.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the history of this particular photo that's up, what's interesting, it has the absence of the lights, the absence of the signs, and shows the coloring on the upper floors of the windows,
It's all white. Everything is white.
Yeah, and the historic tax photo. But it's interesting because you just also see what is the proposed work where the windows look very nice, where it has much more of the red and white along the top, which they had said had already been approved by Landmark. So you see some of the changes that are proposed, but the other ones would really, I think, take away when you look at that particular photograph. And I don't know, Eugene, if you have the other original tax photo, or it's a separate tax photo, that one, which shows a much clearer, rendering of the front facade of the building, I think.
It's a flop house.
Yeah.
Could I go? I need
Yes,
to go.
Albert, but I'd like to keep the conversation sort of element by element. So let's talk about the color of the second, third, and fourth floors.
Well, we just did.
So are you in agreement, Albert? I'm sure you are, from what you said earlier, that it be kept, that it go to white and not black.
Yes.
Agreed.
And it doesn't have to be a stark white, it can be
Yeah.
a soft white. But
A dirty white, as I like to call it, a pre-dirty.
Shaded one.
Okay, that was the first
It looks
aspect.
really pretty, the ground
The
floor.
second is
So
the
interesting.
entry doors. The move from wood to steel.
Yeah.
And also several people made excellent points about the proportion of the glass part of the doors. So what does everybody want to do with that?
well, I think that we have said in other applications that we prefer the wood doors to be
Mhm.
retained. I mean, not the actual wood doors, but the materiality of the wood.
Consistent, right.
And with the glazing aligned with the sills would be a big improvement. So I think we can say that's what we would, I would say that's what I would recommend in terms of their application.
And
I agree. I
is there a
also,
feeling of then denial as presented then on these doors?
yeah, I think they should be wood. If they were wood originally, I think they should be wood and it adds some, I don't know, some texture to it.
Yeah, how about if we deny the metal? Ask that they stay, with a recommendation that the wood material be retained and a recommendation that the proportions be
Look, we can
changed.
improve the design. If you're gonna replace it, give it a shot, baby.
The tax photo actually shows the glazing.
This is
down to
a
the-
Look
separate,
at that.
different tax photo, and it really, when you zoom in on it, it's exactly as what you were.
Yeah,
And get away from the square divided lights, because they are A, wrong, and B, not very elegant. So
yeah, okay,
I know it's subtle, but it really drives me.
okay. So I think we're all in agreement there. Albert and Eugene, how do you feel about that?
I agree with the committee.
Now, the lighting, which I think we all find
I
problematic.
mean, I was talking in the way I talk to my students, I was asking them leading questions, so I'm hearing that there was no examples of it. And even if there was, it's not, it stands out. I thought I was looking like, it looks like something that belongs in a showroom.
Right.
It's nautical is what it is.
Yeah,
It's nautical design.
And then Brian really, put it together like it's really residential, and that's, it's the material and then Anita, your point about the aged brass was like a misnomer, and I was like, exactly, because it sounds like it would be more aged and
Yeah.
it just looks so shiny.
It's the wrong thing. It's
Yeah.
also too
Very
many.
contemporary finish.
Sorry, what?
It's a very contemporary finish, isn't it? It's a very
Oh,
trendy.
totally. Yeah,
I think they were trying to jazz it up, but they jazzed it down.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, this looks cheap.
It's very cheap looking. And and you don't need a lot. I don't even know how many they need. I mean, these streets are illuminated, let's be honest.
Or even something that was even just more closer to.
Minimal.
Yeah, minimal to the building, yeah.
Sure, just something in black that illuminates without too much. And we don't really want a lot of lighting on the facade, really, because it wasn't there before, was it? It's not in any of the pictures.
It wasn't.
Those are really
not.
emphasized here, like these are, line drawings, and then you've got like this, also the choice.
There were two.
Am I right? I mean, I'm like, why are you stacking your lighting on this?
The original,
Line drawing? I mean, am I right?
the original had 2 and they're expanding it to 5.
I would say minimal lighting,
Yeah.
period.
Yeah.
Just don't do it, because it's not on the historic photographs, and
There's no justification.
it
There's
doesn't add
nothing.
anything. In this particular case, it takes away, but even if they were fabulous light fixtures, You don't need a lot. We don't go for that too much.
This is a less is more situation for sure. Okay, what about that blade sign?
I mean, it looks like a probiotic drink brand, and it looks like something that belongs in like Midtown.
Jamba
or
Juice.
something. Yeah, like I'm trying to get like all these tourists to come here.
What, the sign?
Yeah.
The light
sign.
the lit box.
Oh, yeah, it's too bad if they had duplicated the old one. They would have a
Sign?
stronger argument.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this one, first of all, I agree, I can't read it. I had no
Yeah.
idea what it said. So that's a little odd. It's 75 inches tall. That's more than Brian's height.
Taller than, right. exactly.
Yeah, I mean, this is a human up against the building. It's too big, too much. If they're gonna do it, they have to duplicate the historic one or something like that.
Yeah, the historic, they were really making the point that it wasn't over the property line, but I'm like, but I mean, that would have been.
But that would have been
Yeah.
some sort of replication of
Yeah.
that type of
Yeah.
sign would have been great because it would have created a reference
Yeah.
to.
Trust me, the people who want this hotel always found it. It's not a lot of advertising.
High luxury.
Now, LPC has downgraded a lot of their signage regulations, unfortunately. So,
Well, it's come before us, so it wasn't approved.
yeah.
And I think our justification is either duplicate what you can reference historically, and otherwise, no, we don't want that sign. We don't
But
have
there's no-
it.
I think our point is that there's no reference. I mean, that within this application,
Yeah.
there was no reference to anything comparable, nor was the applicant able to
No, I mean,
reference,
it's like a flag, but it's not.
It's
Right,
like,
I mean, even the answer to my question, that was a leading question, I already knew the answer. But to the lighting was that, it was like, oh, it's like historic New York City, it's like, okay, that's like the complete wrong answer to a group like this, right? It's about what's in the district, right? I mean,
Right.
like, and like this was added, this is part of the extension, this building was added and included later for a reason, right?
A part of the signage from the photograph that I had sent, the other tax photo.
Yeah.
If you look at it in the tax photo that they show, this was at the point in the 1940s and whenever they were built, elevated trains were running along
Right.
there. So with the sky above that you see in the photos was a very narrow corridor. So not only did you have to attract attention from people walking, you're also able to show it to the people going
or on
by
the subway,
trains.
right?
So it was a very different focal point for the signage here. And in some ways, the vertical blade sign isn't really in meeting with that because you wouldn't have put it in then because you wouldn't have been able to see it as clearly.
Right.
Well, you wouldn't see it from above or from below.
That's right.
You would get
So
it
in some
like,
ways, that even if it were to stick out, that would even make more sense or being flat, along the facade. It's just it's a more of a modern take. And this was what I was saying. I was a little bit uneasy with a lot of these changes as a whole, taking the building away from what is, not an ugly building, certainly. And I think that it's the same with the other signage. I think that the two signs go together since they're
The plaque and the,
plaque, and I think the plaque should be more of a sign.
and it's also, I agree with the person who was saying, even the typeface. I mean, just give it more effort. I don't think there was a lot of effort put into that
and
little
those are
plaque.
easy things to.
And it is only a plaque, so that's not like
I
that.
don't think that's the hill to die on, but I think that, but I do agree, and all these things, I think the larger point is really that, all these things form an aggregate of what the ultimate proposal is. And when you add,
Streetscape.
it's sort of like 2 + 2 + 2 = like 10 in this kind of a situation,
Well, now I'm confused. I was confused about that other sign. There's another sign over the entrance.
That's right.
that's the one I was asking about. There's a hanging sign.
Well, that's not part of this application because the idea with that is that because there is not a tenant for the retail space.
Well, it says it on our drawing. I just
So
want to
that-
put that out.
So yeah, like that's my question, right? Why is it on the drawing if it's not part of the
So
application?
we have to say that they're gonna come back at another time for that was not part of the application.
Right. Back.
And is that historic? Was there one? Is that what you were saying?
There was, in this photo, you can see it's very small, but over by the above sort of the hood of the black car. On the right, you can see there's a small blade sign that's above what's now the retail store. But what's in the designation photo is different. So, and the designation
I mean,
photo.
I don't know, a little blade sign I can sort of live with. It's like modest, it's small. You know, it's not like.
But it's the three of them.
Exactly, precisely right. Thank you for that. That's right.
It's not any one.
It's not one.
And while this is about the plaque, I felt that that sign is so modern in the box sign.
Plaque.
The
Oh, no,
box sign.
the blade sign.
And the blade sign, excuse me, which is a blade box sign.
Right.
Right. But that, and then the plaque is more akin to a historic designation marker.
But there are different languages, right?
Yeah. So I don't really quite get all the mix of this stuff
Vocabulary is.
together
Right.
when it's, yeah.
And the blade sign that we were just talking about is really in the mix of this fire escape. I mean, this fire escape is a huge feature of this building, especially with solid doors. Is unfortunate. That just.
I think it's fair to express that we would like to see a more coherent language in the signage.
But maybe in a way, it's almost refers back to its more recent history in a way that we should embrace too.
Yeah. Okay, then we have the cellar stairs where they're asking to remove, I guess LPC already approved the removal of 3 courses of brick, but they need 3 additional ones in order to meet.
That's fine. It's a headroom thing. We can't cut people's heads off.
That is what it is, right?
We'll have to give in.
So that's that.
No, they
And now
don't
let's
have
talk,
anything.
and then there are the fire escape doors, which in this application are just being painted. They're not being replaced.
As painted doors in the photograph.
They were white.
rendering in white is much more acceptable. It doesn't stick out as much as the ones that they showed us. But I would still prefer to go all the way back to the original doors, which were glazed. And that was clear in the photographs.
Yeah.
So that would be my suggestion, is that we recommend that they be replaced with those.
And would be a huge improvement on the facade. And they're not willing to spend the money, but they might do it next time as they recover from this renovation.
So then it would be fair to say that if they're simply repairing the doors, that they be painted in the same color that we're recommending for, the lighter color. And that, if they are to be replaced, that they should be replaced. Okay. All right. And now lastly, 51 Barrow.
Oh, could I please go back to the White House Hotel?
Yes.
The White House rooms. I think you all should know
It's not even a White House. I wonder how that happened.
why I asked about the basement entrance. There was a slide that he did not show that showed the basement, which I find absolutely fascinating. There are at least a dozen showers, little shower rooms, and at least a dozen toilets. And there's a
It is,
Donna,
our plan's very unusual.
and all of that is down there. There's no signage to indicate what's going on down there. That's it. I just thought you should all know that.
Yeah, I have to wonder how that passes any kind of building code approval. Doesn't seem like they have light egress. There's no light windows.
What does this have to do with their hotel upstairs?
So that cellar door,
No, it shows.
Is that the basement level? I can't read it.
can't
very well.
tell either. Are you
That's the
saying,
ground floor. And I think, Albert, that they've taken the old lobby of the hotel and the lobby side, and they have made it into that large retail space that you see on the screen now, that's all white. And they're retaining the rooms on the bottom, but that was the lobby space. And in recent, since the 90s, as long as I know, and I think probably prior to that, and the lower part of the rendering that is now the hotel lobby has been since the 90s a retail space or some, accessory space. So they've actually changed the configuration.
Albert, what makes you think that those are showers and toilets?
Because that's what it said.
All the little rooms are beds.
On the basement level drawing that I saw.
Yeah, this is not what he saw.
I did not make this up, I'm sure.
Sent to us. I think, Albert, is the presentation you're looking at, was that emailed to you more than 2 days ago? 3 days ago?
Yes.
Yeah, so
they changed.
They made updated presentation that we're looking at. And what you're looking at, because I said, hey, to myself, hey, I thought all the floor plans were on here and they're not. So you actually have the information I was interested in.
Oh, interesting. We are looking at, that's the disconnect. I see.
Because Albert's, what he's looking at does not have all the photographs, I believe, that we're seeing.
All right, well, is any of this relevant to our resident?
It's unusual.
Yeah, it is unusual, yeah.
But these are tiny, tiny, tiny rooms.
That's sort of back to the SRO.
No windows. How does that even work?
Okay.
It said there's only one that says toilet. And there were at least 8.
Okay, so now I understand what you're talking about. All right, thank you. So now, lastly, we've got 51 Barrow Street with all that non-visible, which was largely non-visible, right? It's the rebuilt rear facade and the rear addition and leveling the roof and the rooftop mechanicals. Does anybody have anything to say about any of that? Albert or Eugene? No?
I'm okay.
Yeah, no, it seems fine. It didn't seem like there was anything visible.
Yeah, no, it didn't seem like there was. I think we should add in the resolution just something about, the excavation being represented as meeting commission rules. And
again, these are very old buildings.
Right,
They're built on rubble foundations. A lot has been done to this little house. I've actually been in it years ago. I mean, it's amazing what it's.
Right, and also, they hadn't received their engineer's report yet, which I realized related more to their unusual condition on that rear facade. But still, I think it's important to say something about
You
having.
should do that, exactly what Chenault usually
Yeah.
does, where it's just,
Some of that's a little bit excessive for this situation, I think, but I guess better safe
well,
than
it's a
sorry.
very old building. I mean,
Yeah.
again, these are rubble wall foundations. They're really not meant to be exposed.
Yeah.
They have to be supported and underpinned and, or pull away from them even better. But here, they're slicing it right at the property line, so.
All right, is there anything else?
Does anybody remember the vintage of the 44 Jane house?
The vintage,
44.
well, it was Greek
1842 to
revival.
46.
What was it?
That row was constructed between 1842 and 1846.
Oh, it's the Greek
So we don't have a-
revival right around the Italian age,
So
as he was describing it.
transition, yeah.
Mostly Greek revival, except for the corners, in my opinion. Which makes sense. These
Yeah,
spaces,
I didn't realize till I saw the sign-in sheet that the architect
owners.
and one of the architect's employees was here with the owners.
yeah, I talked to them. I said, congratulations, because they got a little cute dollhouse.
Well, the owners, right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the architects were, because I don't believe either of the architects said anything, did they?
They had the historic preservation present.
Jackie.
I know.
Jackie
And
presented.
I kept saying, well, the architect is sitting in the back of the room. I thought it was
What
the
room?
back of Jackie's room, you know, behind
I
her.
thought the same thing.
no
Yeah, I
issue.
thought it was in
It
the
was a
back of
pretty
her
clean,
room.
Yeah,
it was a clean application. We had
It
no
was.
issues, so
it was very much.
good to go.
Okay. There's no new
We were
business.
told at a higher rate if you had to talk.
We're wrapped. If there's no new business.
A word of thanks to Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
thank you. It's great to see you, Albert and Eugene. I miss seeing you in person. But it's
Well,
lovely to see
Okay,
you.
I haven't been able to go
Any
out.
way we can.
for a long
All
time.
right.
Okay,
All right.
See you guys.
Great, good seeing you, everyone. Good
Now we've got
night.
to
Thanks,
end
everybody.
now I have to find out about the press conference in NoHo. Very important in NoHo, the Biden press conference.
Biden one. Okay, I was like, the NoHo one.
He's not in NoHo.
All right, good night, Albert.
Okay, good night.